What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was chosen by fate to lead a harem of reincarnated goddess? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Fuck, Naruto screamed out as he was swatted away by this self-proclaimed rabbit goddess, Kaguya. He was smashed into the ground and shook as it crumbled on top of him. The blonde flinched as he stood, every bone and nerve was telling him to stop moving and rest. However, being a powerhouse and stubborn in his own right, he ignored those screams and focused on getting back into the fight. He glanced up just in time to see Sasuke get smacked down next to him, though he recovered midair and landed on his feet. Both were heavily breathing and could barely keep going the way things were. At this rate Kaguya would win, and all because they couldn't touch her at the same time. Damn it, Kurama, you have any ideas? Not a. Oh wait, maybe I do. It will take a few minutes though, and you might be in even worse pain than before. At this rate I'll take pain over this bitch winning. Get to the tree, I'll take over from there. See if the Uchiha can get you a few minutes. Got it, Sasuke. The brooder flinched and looked at him. I am right next to you, you idiot. What is it? Naruto held up his palm. He knew what it meant. 5 minutes? No problem. And just like before, the successful Avenger blossomed his Susanoo and ran back into the fray. Naruto turned to the Shinju, the god tree, and made a beeline for it. When he reached the base there was nothing but a few flowers around it, and if he didn't know better he would say it was beautiful there. Alright Kurama, you're up. The sage set his palm against the tree and let Kurama do his thing. During the time that the two reincarnations were apart, while his mother was focused on the Uchiha, Zetsu was drawn by the fact the Uzumaki wasn't attacking as well. He glanced across the field and saw him standing at the base of the Shinju just touching it. At first he was confused until he felt his connection with mother lessening. That brat is trying to unseal the Biju. How can he even fucking know how to do that? Mother, the Uzumaki. Zetsu screamed out and distracted Kaguya from Sasuke. Indra's reincarnation took the opportunity and with a swift swipe, detached the arm that hid Zetsu. Kaguya let out a small scream as her arm flew to the ground and growled as a new one formed from the socket. The rabbit goddess narrowed her eyes. You insolent child, don't you see I am trying to help? Sasuke didn't get a chance to answer as she flew at him and landed a right hook into his jaw. And before he could go flying she gripped his hair with her left hand, tried to toss him in the other direction. When she grabbed him however he slid a kunai into his hand and lopped her hand off. It crumbled to dust and he had to duck before his head got sliced by her sword-like elbow. Naruto, whatever you have planned, hurry the fuck up. Kit, I am almost done. This is gonna feel like hell, but it should be quick. Kurama slid out of his meditation position and get next to his container, shrinking down to the size of a horse. I am gonna be honest with you Naruto. I don't know if you'll see me again after I am done. What I am doing could be considered treason against higher powers, though Kaguya is higher on that list than me. The strongest of the 9 sat on its hind legs. Lights flashed through the mindscape as figures appeared. Shukaku, Matabi, Isobu, Goku, Kakuo, Saiken, Chomei, and Gyuki. They just filtered in as though they were simply invisible before. Naruto looked at them all with a giant smile until what Kurama had said to him caught up. Wait, what do you mean, never see you again? Kurama looked down, not answering. Gyuki looked around before he could feel what was happening. Naruto, I suggest you brace yourself. The word, why, was on the tip of his tongue before a scream ripped through his throat. Just like that, he crumbled where he stood, flying into the fetal position, alternating between holding his head and lying down flat as though trying to relieve the pressure on his chakra pathways. Matabi and Saiken ran to him, hoping that they could at least see if they can help him control the pain. Saiken, feeling his temperature, created bubbles that, even in his mindscape, felt as though they worked on the outside as well. Kurama just stared at his host with sadness. He knew what awaited him after this. More than likely, after they killed or resealed Kaguya, one of the gods, the true gods, would descend on them and snatch him away for punishment. At least he entrusted the safety of his brothers and sisters to Naruto. The host to contain all 9 Biju looked over at Kurama in his pain-induced daze, seeing him say a few words to Gyuki before the 8 tails nodded. He held his hand up against Matabi and softly rubbed her flame-like fur. After just a few moments, even though it felt never-ending, the pain had substantially subsided. A dull aching throb echoed within him and he just lay there, continuously petting the Nekomata. 2 minutes passed in the real world as Naruto came to. His body still ached but not as bad as before. Besides, past the aching he felt whole, more invigorated than he ever has been before, even after the old man gave him that special chakra. The sound of lightning pierced his ears as he saw Sasuke barely holding his own against Kagaya, though they all knew she was toying with him. Punching and slashing at the rabbit goddess only annoyed her. Even after infusing lightning chakra into his Kusanagi, it did nothing to her. Sure, he cut her arm and hand off, but that was because she wasn't expecting it, but now, she was pissed, more than before. Sasuke felt a surge in chakra on the blonde and hoped that whatever it was finished soon. As much as he may be strong and prideful, even he knew that he'll get killed at this rate. While fighting her though, he caught onto something. Kagaya seemed as though she had to put more effort into her strikes, more energy into her sidestep. Like she was getting weaker. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly and stole a glance over the woman's shoulder to the blonde at the tree. You brilliant fucking idiot. Kagaya herself was in confusion. She had felt her power slowly being siphoned off, but couldn't tell how. She pondered it while sidestepping and noticed she needed more energy than normal to move from Indra's attack. She kept dancing around his strikes and could tell he was getting tired from being on the constant assault, but realized that as soon as he stopped she would be right there to continue where he left off. Like a smack to the face, Kagaya widened her eyes as she knew what was happening. Zetsu's words sang out to her. That lapse in concentration caused her to catch Sasuke's left heel in her cheek. That was all the Uchiha needed to catch a second wind. Skillfully slid the sword back into its sheath and came back around to throw his right fist into her nose. Utilizing the new ability to fly, he stepped on the air and slid behind the ex-royal and kneed her head, snapping it forward. The goddess screamed her annoyance and shot her elbow out and extended the bone, hoping to catch the Uchiha out of tempo. Thanks to the Sharingan, he saw the bone slide from her elbow and stepped to the left, getting to her right side. Before he could try anything he had to duck and backstep as she swung her arm around to cut his head off. When Sasuke looked up at her, he almost gave up. The once regal face that held no emotion was filled with an unholy fury directed solely at him. She crouched slightly and started to dash toward him. Thinking quickly, he flew through the seals for the Chidori Iso and used it as a sort of buffer between them. He didn't have to hold out long as Naruto appeared beside him. Wait, what? Sasuke looked to his right at the blonde who literally just appeared, as though he had been non-existent beforehand. I can't sense him, like he isn't even here. But, his chakra, it's too damn bright. Sasuke. His name broke his thoughts. Sorry about that. It was more painful than what was described to me. The Avenger scoffed. Even out of breath he had time to jest. Nothing I couldn't handle, unlike you. A smirk was his answer. This idiot. Sasuke stole another glance at him. He's radiating confidence and power. Just what the hell, Naruto? Naruto kept his eyes trained on Kagaya. The slightly panting goddess might have been slightly erotic if not for the fact they were trying to kill each other. Right, Naruto started, this is it, Kagaya. And to be truthful, I feel as though somehow we could have been friends if you weren't so hell-bent on everyone's death. Kagaya stared, eyes still narrow. Insert Shinedown. Adrenaline. The sage exhaled softly, and within an instant his whole demeanor changed. Gone was the silly blonde who was always rushing in. Now stood before her was a serious shinobi who wanted to end this fight, and most likely however he can. Some of the awake ninja compared the look to that of Minato when he entered a battle. Naruto snapped his eyes open and an instant later he was in front of her, smashing his fist into her face. The impact sent her flying with wide eyes. The blonde crouched and shot off after her trying to get ahead to follow up. Kagaya righted herself and screeched to a halt. Extending her fingers to him, she shot the fingertips like bullets at him, but Naruto simply dipped and slid out of the way. Just as he got within range for her to try using more bones from her Shikatsumyaku, he disappeared. In that moment she and Sasuke off to the side had a terrible revelation. My Sharingan, it can't track him. Behind her, Naruto kicked her in the side, sending her crashing down to the planet. Bouncing off the ground, Kagaya coughed and stood as fast as she could. That blonde child had taken power from the Shinju and it gave him more prowess than her. She was the goddess here. Not a spoiled child. She didn't have time to react when said child came right down on top of her with a heel kick that forced her head to the dirt again. When she felt the earth against her cheek, she twisted her body to try and kick his feet out from under him. Naruto felt himself go down but leant back and used his hands as a spring to right himself with a backflip. Kagaya noticed something about him when he backed up. He wasn't using the cloak that symbolized his union with that beast. It was all him. Slight fear crept inside her at that thought before being squashed. She wouldn't give him the opportunity to even try it. Her Rinasharingen pulsed when she threw her hand out, sending the blonde careening with a Shinra Tensai. Smacking into a rock formation, the sage quickly hit the ground and was on the move toward her once again. This woman. I have to get Sasuke near her quickly. She needs to be resealed and fast. Sasuke, you ready? The Avenger was still in awe but quickly caught on. He nodded and started moving to Kagaya. She turned and smacked the fist aimed at her stomach away and punched the Uchiha a few feet away before she had to duck from another fist aimed at the back of her head. She threw her left elbow out and caught Naruto in the stomach before he burst into smoke covering her vision. Her Byakugan flared quickly, searching for him, and backstepped when he tried coming at her from above with another kick. She saw the Uchiha behind her throwing those lightning senbon. She turned and used the Rinasharingen to absorb the chakra, but had to move when the sage came at her from the side throwing his own kunai. Kagaya was breathing heavily. Never had she had to move so much. The others simply died or moved from her way. Kit, I can spare a bit more chakra, but after this I'll have to rest again. Naruto nodded and stuck his fist out to bump. When they touched fists, Naruto's power, already high, skyrocketed once more. His cloak was different this time around, but he couldn't focus on that. Naruto zoomed in on her, drawing her closer to Sasuke so they can seal her. Kagaya had to duck the first strike, but the second hit from the blonde almost made her head fly from its perch. It snapped to the left and followed, using his momentum to turn and roundhouse kick her in the side, sending her skidding back further. Sasuke was right up on her, using as much lightning chakra he could muster, shocked the hell out of her. Kaguya's body froze up and convulsed, but try as she might she couldn't move and inside, resigned to her fate. Done in, by my own grandchildren. Naruto slid next to Sasuke and pressed his palm against Kagaya. It was weird. He felt happy, but something inside him cried out in sorrow. He looked into the white-haired princess's face and saw her smile. She began to lift in the air, the earth around them coming together around her body, trying to form her new moon prison. Sasuke and Naruto turned to see the severed arm of Kagaya, yet inside its sleeve the black Zetsu was writhing within. The two reincarnations looked to each other before nodding. Naruto walked to him. You wanted to be with your mother, right? Zetsu had a crawling fear at those words. Naruto reached him and grabbed the arm. Well, he drew his own arm back and threw it toward the forming moon. Join her. I'll kill you, Uzumaki, Uchiha. Just you wait. And with that harrowing cry, the fight between the goddess and the rest of the shinobi nation had ended. Song end. Naruto looked at the new moon, a sense of confliction inside him. He knew it had to be done, but he shook his head. No, there was nothing else that could have happened. She would have killed them all. He looked over at Sasuke, about to thank him. However, he noticed the look his friend had. Just like all those years ago, he was jealous. Sasuke. Nothing. Sasuke. Again, nothing. Sasuke's hand twitched, and before Naruto could call out to him again, Sasuke turned and looked him in the eye. Kamui. No chance, not even to move. He was sucked into the dimensional rift and gone from this world. Before he was fully gone, he heard the bastard mutter, I am sorry, Naruto. Scene change. Wind whipped past his face, and his body hurt. Not from the fight, no, the upgraded healing factor from having the 9 Biju got rid of that. It felt like his body was slowly trying to change the chakra he had, but his body fought back. He could hear the screaming of the Biju calling his name out but couldn't answer himself. He didn't know how long he was falling, but he knew that it would definitely hurt when he hit grow. The sound of earth moving from force sounded out in the forest. And while normally one would simply write it off as a pissed grim, when you see the sight of a body falling from the sky, you have to at least go and retrieve it. Luckily for the body, one Kirao Bronwyn was out with the class that day. Turning to his assistant, take them back to Signal, I'll be back soon. Tell Ruby and Yang to wait for me after classes. And with that he jumped out into the forest in search of the crash site, after taking a swig from his flask of course. It wasn't too hard to find the site considering it was a large crater in the middle of nowhere. When he went to the side of the hole he slid on it to get next to the body. Quickly doing a once-over to check on damage he saw nothing. So he picked the boy up and got out of there. He didn't feel like fighting Grim at the moment. A couple days passed on the outside world. For Naruto however, it had been weeks. His mindscape's time flow was a blessing and a curse. It did help him get an explanation from his inner friends about what was happening, but then he had to get used to how it felt compared to chakra. While the same in a short sense, it had a different affect than what it could do. For starters, he gained an ability that he thought was as badass as the Biju's Bijudama. It also felt like a protective coat along his body, similar to the cloaks his friends gave him. His friends were okay too thankfully. It seemed as though the conversion didn't harm them and still felt normal. So using the time he had, he did what he normally does. Train. While nothing physical like running or push-ups, he did train his mind to use his new abilities since that is more mental than physical. Alas, his training came to an end when his body began to wake up. He glanced around the room he was in and scowled lightly. Stupid hospital. Ah, you're awake? Naruto looked over at the voice and saw someone that reminded him of Isaribi. The woman was medium height, 5 feet 6 inches maybe, brown hair that fell to her shoulders and a doctor coat. Didn't seem so weird except for the fact she had 2 cat ears atop her head that twitched occasionally. The woman saw him staring at her ears and they drooped slightly, expecting this man to be a racist too, but, kawaii. The soft call of her patient drew her attention back and turned to see him up and just about to rub her ears. Please don't deny. The denial was squashed as she felt his fingertips scratch at the base of her ears. And within moments she delved into purrs, which had to come to a crashing halt as the door opened and in came a man whom his friends told him had the same signature as the one who carried him here. Kirao opened the door expecting to see the nurse changing the IV on his rescue, but when he opened the door and saw the man standing and scratching the faunus nurse on her ears, he didn't know what to do. So he did what he always did in awkward situations and turned on his heel and left. The half-purr-induced comatose nurse used the opportunity, though reluctantly, to move away from him. Sir, please, I'll need you to sit back down and let me run a couple tests. All she got was a blank stare. Nani? What? Naruto blinked twice and asked his friends what to do. They drew a blank as well, but Matatani suggests they bump fists with her. So he did, or tried to. Naruto held his fist out for the nurse to bump but she just stared at him with a raised eyebrow. Naruto, getting that she didn't know what to do, made the motion of bumping his own fists and held it back out. The nurse was confused on how this will help but did it anyway. However, they didn't think they would get drawn into his mindscape. The nurse flew back onto her butt as she saw the 9 giant figures. She knew they weren't grim from the non-black-white coloring, but that didn't make it any less scary for her. The giant blue cat-like, which she approved of, slowly moved to her. Her instincts screamed at her to get away, but she couldn't move, rooted in her fear of them. She felt another presence behind her and saw her patient giving the cat a, really? Look. Matabi, please don't. I can feel the fear she's giving off. The nurse looked at her patient. I can understand you. Naruto looked at her and blinked. Huh, well then that works too. Hopefully I will be able to understand the other people too. He glanced back at the giant cat. Thanks for the idea, Tabi-chan. The giant cat laughed lightly. Kitties know how to talk to one another, Naruto-kun. The sage turned to the nurse in his mindscape and helped her up. Hi, I am Naruto and I am sorry, but... Naruto's face turned serious and the nurse thought she was in trouble. For what she didn't know, you seem a little pale. At that moment the tense atmosphere was broken and the blonde held a small watering pail in his left hand. He chuckled at the look on her face and willed the pail away. All the giants behind her groaned at the stupid joke, though they can sense that the woman was less scared now. Thanks for the help everyone, but I think she'd feel better out in the real world. With that they left the Biju alone. The nurse opened her eyes to see the blonde smiling at her. I will have to ask that you keep that a secret, nay? She nodded blankly. No one would believe her anyway. She had to go get that Kirao guy anyway. He was responsible for him since being brought in. She turned and left. Naruto silently waved, and when the door closed he frowned. When she was brought to the mindscape he didn't mean to, but he saw some of her memories. Just like me, huh? A minute later the door opened and the guy that supposedly brought him in came in along with a blonde-haired girl that was about as tall as him that wore bike shorts. A yellow tank top underneath a brown leather-like jacket. Following her was a smaller girl with black hair and red highlights wearing a black and red shirt and matching battle skirt. Over top that was a red hooded cape. "Hello kid, my name's Kirao. I'll cut to the chase, the hell happened to you?" As soon as the sentence left his lips, the blonde girl smacked the back of his head. He teased and mumbled about being old enough to curse. The small girl just stared at Naruto with curiosity. Gotta agree with old man here. The man named Kirao was now in a corner drawing circles in the floor with a stick from somewhere. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. And I have no idea where I am." Kirao was back on his feet with a serious look in his eye. The blonde girl along with the short one were shocked. Kirao was never serious. "If the nurse hadn't told me you were speaking another language 5 minutes ago, I wouldn't have believed you. However, considering she told me you bumped fists and magically learned how to speak ours, I'm gonna chalk it up to some aura power from wherever you're from." He relaxed his stance a little bit. "So I'll do you a favor. I'll tell you a bit of the history and you tell me yours. Sound good?" Naruto silently thought a bit. He knew some of what's been going on from that nurse's memories, but didn't know a lot. He only knew that faunas are discriminated against, the land is called Remnant, and there were beasts modeled after animals called Grim that plagued the land. Coming up short on information wasn't good for a ninja, so he had to take the advantage. "Alright, I'll bite, but," Naruto held his fist out, "it'll be easier this way. We can take as much time as we need if we talk like this." Kirao raised his brow but proceeded to fist bump Naruto. And in that moment, his mind was blown. Naruto showed Kirao some of his memories, matching up to the stories he told him, leading up until the point of him arriving in Remnant. He also figured that he should only show Kirao these things, as he has seen what it's like to be in a war, even if it was against beasts. In turn Kirao filled him in on what spots he was missing, the kingdoms, their leaders, military, to an extent, hunters and huntresses, along with the school training them. After a moment outside the two broke apart and the two girl with Kirao saw something in his eyes. They only saw it once when he brought them along to visit that old man Ironbutt, something like kinsmanship. Like a teammate and fellow fighter. Kirao sighed lightly and smiled, "Well Naruto, that is indeed quite the story. And from what I saw, I have no chance but to help you adjust." The sage smiled at the Kirao. "Thank you Kirao. I guess you can tell how much it means to me." Kirao nodded, still smiling, turned to the girls. "Well, introduce yourselves to your new housemate." The blonde girl snapped a little. "Wait, what? You didn't even say a word. You just touched his fist and all of a sudden you're friends and he's staying with us?" Kirao turned to her and saw the serious look back in his eyes. "Yang, trust me, that was all that was needed," and she was quiet again. Naruto looked at the other girl with them and matched her gaze. Immediately he knew she had immense power within her. He clammed up slightly when he stared into her eyes. Silver. A flash of the Rinnegan flew into his mind but went away quickly. No, they weren't like that. They were more pure. "You," his voice caught their attention and saw his staring at Ruby's eyes. "You have silver eyes." Kirao widened his own eyes slightly. Could Naruto feel the power of? No. No, he couldn't. He was only just brought here. He doesn't even know the legend. He'll have to talk to Ozpin soon. He was anyway considering Naruto's prowess. He'll be in Beacon in no time. Ruby blushed lightly. No one has stared at her eyes like that before. Thanks. Yang however saw this as an opportunity. Even in front of Kirao she'll tease her sister. Ooh, does little sis have a crush on the cute blondie here? Naruto blushed along with Ruby, though Kirao looked slightly miffed and amused. He can see this already being a good bond forming. 6 months later, Kirao and Naruto panted as they finished their spar. Kirao, after getting Naruto to the shared house he had with his nieces, asked if he wanted to learn anything besides kunai and the other ninja weaponry. Feeling as though the knowledge of different weapons would be good, he took up that offer and instantly took a liking to Crow's scythe. The way it curved menacingly called to him, that or it was the 9 inside him saying it was badass and to make his own. And so he did. A scythe, assault rifle hybrid. It is said that students at Signal make their first weapon. That is true, but some like him and Ruby made theirs before their final year. Since they were the same age they got the same classes and year. Ruby didn't mind. She along with her uncle and Yang had gotten close with Naruto. She more than Yang and Kirao though. They after all did make similar weapons, that coupled with the fact they are in the same classes, made the same friends, though Naruto seemed better at it, and had an unholy love of cookies. Naruto cried when he found out there was no noodle shops. He had to find a substitute somewhere. Naruto's first weapon was a scythe he decided to call Shingetsu, New Moon. It was kinda funny when Ruby named hers Crescent Rose. When asked why, she lightly blushed and said, after every new moon there's a crescent. It was also her way of saying she'll always be right behind him, helping him when he needed it. She was a bit infuriated when Kirao was teaching them and he seemed to just soak the information into his head and nearly always, perfectly executed a move. If he remembers right, Naruto saw Kirao cry mumbling something about having to work forever and he sees it once and does it the first time. Needless to say he wanted to make another weapon to learn about. This one seemed more like a rapier with a pistol built into the handle. He decided to name it Rieterpalash. When he was making it, Kirao shook his head and mumbled about cashing a favor in. He was supposed to be finding that out now. Kirao exhaled heavily one last time. God kid, you sure can give me a workout. Surprising all things considered. Naruto rolled his eyes. He knew how old Kirao was. That being said, I did say that I would tell you what I mentioned about your rapier. Since I work with my scythe and its forms I couldn't help ya. But do you remember old Ironbutt I told you about? Kirao had taken a liking to the nickname his nieces had given Ironwood. Naruto nodded. You said he was teaching the other heiress, right? Weiss? The old scythe master nodded. Right. Well, she is using a rapier-like weapon as well. I guess you can see where I'm going with this. The ninja nodded. I'm guessing that since you're too lazy to come with, you're sending me out alone to learn with her. He could feel the sheepish head scratch Kirao wanted to make. That's actually okay. But my question, Naruto leaned forward a little, whispering, do Yang and Rubes know? He didn't want to hurt their feelings, maybe making them think he was never coming back. Yang was like a sister to him and Ruby, well, he didn't know honestly. He couldn't describe it, but it felt like maybe there was something there. He wasn't good with relationships. Especially when he didn't see the blatant sign of Shion asking him to fuck her, as pointed out by Shukaku. It made the situation worse when Kirao and Yang both looked at him and Ruby playing a game on the TV one day shoulder to shoulder, and told the two, we approve, just use, and then get cut off by Ruby using her speed semblance to push them away. Yay they do, and they told me to tell you that you better bring them something nice back from Atlas. Naruto let out a chuckle. He spoiled them, what can he say? Ah, before I forget, what is it you wanted to show me? The sage tensed slightly but figured it was time. During the initial showing of how he got to Remnant, Naruto left out all knowledge of the Biju. It was time to rectify that. He held out his fist and bumped together with Crow's. When he reopened his eyes he almost fell. An hour later saw Kirao and Naruto at an airship docks waiting the ninja's ride to Atlas. Kirao quickly came to accept the fact Naruto had Biju in him. It wasn't hard considering all the other shit he was shown. Naruto, when you meet the heiress, go easy on her. Kirao in a showing of his soft side spoke about Weiss. Winter, well plainly put, I don't like her, don't hate her, but I definitely don't like her. And I have more than a feeling that Winter and Weiss's father may be an issue in that as well. Naruto looked at the now seemingly older man before nodding. The airship arrived soon after and took Naruto off to Atlas for his training. A few hours later when he landed, he kissed the cold ground. Someone on the flight had been having some bad thoughts and drew a small murder of Nevermore to the ship. And they wouldn't let him do anything, not even man a gun. Some of the shots got a little too close for comfort from the surrounding craft, but they got through it. He stood back up when he heard a cough and looked to see a man about the same age as Kirao wearing a slightly different version of the Atlesian military uniform. So you must be Naruto. Said ninja nodded his head and stuck his hand out. Didn't want to accidentally bring him in like that nurse lady. Nice to meet you. General Ironby Wood. Kirao told him what Ironwood looked like. Would have been bad otherwise. The general took the hand and looked into Naruto's eyes for a moment, searching for something. He pulled his hand away and smirked. I think I'm gonna like you, kid. They began walking inland toward a specific building. Inside was a huge field with obstacles and an arena clearly meant for challenges. In the middle of said obstacles was a girl with pure white hair, with an off-white, blue dress, running the course. And she was fast. Incredibly so. Almost as fast as he was without a couple of the seals he had to set. It had come clear to him he needed to limit his power when he almost killed Kurama in a spar. He let out a low whistle. Ironwood, thinking he was whistling at Weiss and not the work she was doing, piece of advice for you kid, don't let her catch you. She may be used to the suitors and such, but it definitely doesn't mean she likes it. Naruto blushed and stammered out that he wasn't looking at her like that. Though secretly he was. I am just impressed at how fast she is going. The general looked at the blonde. Oh yay, he was gonna have fun teasing this kid. Hey, a general he may be, but fun he can have. Right, well that is her semblance. Glyphs. She has the ability to make different ones. Elemental if she infuses dust with them, or even the speed ones she's using now. Their conversation came to an end when she finished the course, took a breath, and turned to see her instructor and some blonde boy with whisker scars on his face, though they were thin. She didn't hate Faunus, contrary to belief because of her father and how the company stands. She looked at his waist and saw a rapier not completely unlike her own. Naruto caught her gaze and slowly pulled Rieterpalash from his waist. When she got next to them, Weiss said hello to her teacher and sized the blonde up, him doing the same. After a moment he held out the sword and asked to see hers. She pulled Myrtanaster from her side and they swapped weapons momentarily. Naruto after being taken in learned a lot more about the world than he was initially told. So when he saw the dust canisters on the side of the weapon he nodded in respect. He should have done that with his own. Weiss was having similar thoughts. The rapier in her hands was self-made. She could tell by the small inscription she couldn't understand near the handguard. She lifted the grip and looked at the way the pommel sat and figured that it could be moved so dust could be fired from the barrel along the blade. The two turned back at each other and gave the weapons back. Naruto smiled. "Ya no, I wish I had thought of using dust cylinders instead. I have aura to spare sure, but I can't add elements to mine." Weiss looked at Ironwood and he nodded lightly, a little sign they set up for wannabe suitors. Nod means they're okay, shaking means she has something else to do. It was a thought I had when having it made actually. Coupled with my semblance and it could be over in minutes. Being a ninja, Naruto detected the subtle hints of arrogance forming her sentence though he couldn't say anything as it could also be a true statement. Ironwood stepped up. "Weiss, this here is Naruto Uzumaki. As a favor to a dusty old crow he will be learning the basics of rapier combat." Weiss raised a brow. "Why just the basics?" Naruto took point. "Well, I need a stable format to form my own style." The heiress looked at him a little shocked honestly. Rapier combat had been the same for quite a while actually. Maybe it was time a new style came up. No doubt people, pray gods she never had to fight another, would find a way to counter it. Already thinking ahead, "Okay, it'll help too if when you're finished with it you teach me too." Ironwood raised his brow this time. It took Weiss weeks before she asked for help, and this boy, HMM. Naruto simply smiled. "Sure, I have no problem with that." Yes, the general mused. This may be more than beneficial for dear Weiss. 2 months 3 weeks later. A lot has happened in the almost 3 months. Naruto, like with Kirao, soaked the knowledge up from the general and heiress. Since he was learning fast he decided to tell them a bit about himself, not his past but just some things here and there. Not only that but he had already started teaching Weiss some of the movements to the style he thought of. Since he was a ninja he was agile and Weiss being already quick and having to twist her body to efficiently use her glyphs, he thought she could benefit from it. At times it got awkward however. When she would misstep or lose balance Naruto was always there to correct her or catch her. When she couldn't get a movement right, Naruto, not seeing how intimate it seemed, took her back to his front and flew through the motions again loosely. Oftentimes he would see her blushing afterward and not know why. Even after being told by the Biju about Shion he was still clueless about romantic feelings. Today was a different occasion though. Today was not a day to train, but it was Weiss's test for her acceptance into Beacon Academy. Naruto was told about Beacon along with its headmaster Ozpin. He'll just have to see what happens though. He didn't have a good feeling about her test however, it wasn't about her failing, no, he had perfect faith in her. It was the room itself. There was someone here who radiated bad intent and he couldn't pinpoint it without going into Kurama's sage mode. And he didn't want that chaos just yet. Watching Weiss silently beside him was Ironwood, next to him was Weiss's father. And like Crow's prediction, Naruto didn't like him. He always held the holier-than-thou attitude along with holding Faunas in a complete shite light. Scattered around the room were spectators of Atlas, both Faunas and human. Mr. Schnee wasn't so bigoted that he couldn't stop them from watching or show off. It was going smoothly until Weiss got knocked onto the ground after the Atlesian knight she had been scripted to fight sidestepped and swung over her head and put the force of the metal of its body, along with its sword, onto her. When she fell, the blade of the knight's sword sliced her over her right eye vertically, just missing her actual eye and cutting the skin above and below. Blood seeped out slowly and soon dribbled down her chin. She flinched lightly as she stood, but quickly overcame the surprise of being stuck and used her glyphs to dash around the knight and strike at the area on his back. Soon the metal man was down and inoperable. Weiss slowly sat out of breath, and turned to look up at her father, seeing him stoic which as usual, Ironwood smiling lightly, and Naruto simply beaming at her. She swore she saw a sparkle on his teeth. The moment was cut short as she felt someone walking to her holding something. A quick glance up at the booth that held her father, teacher and friend showed they thought it was weird. And Naruto himself was no longer smiling. She looked at the man approaching and started to get fearful when he dashed at her, raising his hand. The serrated steel of the knife glinting in the lowly lit room. Die you Schnee bitch. She had to move. She was exhausted, but she had to move. Weiss's body fought her though and in the end won. It didn't matter however, as before the would-be attacker got within 5 feet of her. A beam of white-gray light struck through him and made him fly across the room. Looking to her left, Weiss saw Naruto a few feet away with an emotionless face and his hand extended like a gun, a weirdly shaped floating skull behind him. She put the pieces together and exhaled lightly with a shaky breath. Naruto reached her and helped her up. Military personnel running to the downed man to apprehend or save his life long enough to jail him. The fellow students of Ironwood left to their training ground. They had designated a spot to rest when teaching her the new style. Said spot, being out of the eyes of the other room's occupants at the time, was in the rafters. A ladder leading up to it put there by Naruto to make it easier for Weiss to reach. They got to the spot and it looked as though there was a room there. A chair and table set up as well as a couch and TV, all white. Naruto sat Weiss down on the couch and sat next to her. He knew what she was feeling right now. Almost dying is not the best experience. He had felt the hatred that man had been putting out, but it was so thick he couldn't pinpoint it. When he finally was making his move to Weiss, the sage finally felt the source and had to move then. He would have released the seals, but he didn't have the extra few seconds, so he resolved from jumping down to the arena, slightly surprising Mr. Schnee, as Ironwood was already relaying orders to his soldiers. Even as a ninja, with all the seals on him, he was as good as any chunin, but it wasn't enough, so he settled for things the other way. He raised his hand like a gun and took aim just ahead of the attacker. He recoiled his hand as if he had just shot a gun and heard the telltale sign of his semblance form and fired behind him. The beam hit the man dead in his chest and he was either already dead or would be within minutes. It was the reason he didn't use his semblance. It either killed someone or put them on the process to dying. Weiss was shaking slightly. She only took a deep breath. "Thank you, Naruto," said Ninja, just grabbed her shoulder lightly and turned her to face him. Fear was still in her eyes again. You can't blame her. Weiss. She looked at his face and saw his light smile. It's okay to cry sometimes. And that was all it took. Her face scrunched up as tears bled from her eyes. She gripped him as hard as she could, her body making sure she had a comfort source, and sobbed. Next day, he was standing in Mr. Schnee's office along with Ironwood and a few Atlesians. He was brought in to be thanked, but then it quickly delved into striking back at the White Fang as they had found the grim mask hidden on the dog Faunus's body. "General, I want something done. You can't just expect me to sit here with my thumb up my ass when someone just attacked my family." While he may not show it publicly, Mr. Schnee was indeed a family man, the one thing Naruto liked about him. Ironwood shook his head, and as I keep telling you, we can't do anything yet. Nothing has turned up about them until after the White Fang has done something. He sighed and took a seat. But there may be a way if someone is up for it. The general made a pointed look at the blonde ninja. I am at least willing to listen. Good. Ironwood shifted his other leg, Admittedly, I thought you were a faunus until I saw you didn't have a single trait besides the scars on your face, and from what you told me, they might just help us here." Naruto could already tell where this was heading. Honestly, it might not even work, but with those scars you can pass as a faunus, or at least a human who understands the plight they're trying to fight against. Called it. You know I am not Atlesian, or in the military for that matter. Half false. Technically he was still a Konoha ninja. I know, that's why I am asking, not as a military leader, or even your teacher, but a friend. And if not for me. Bastard knew he couldn't say no now. Just tell me where you need me. And tell Weiss I'll be back for Reiterpalash next week. He had to leave then and there. So there wasn't any time for a goodbye. Leaving Weiss his rapier made sure that they'd see each other again though. He also gave the things he bought for Yang and Ruby to Ironwood to send to Kirao along with a letter explaining things. Besides that though, their little plan worked. He was inside the White Fang. It was actually an accident. He was heading back and forth in the woodlands on his way to Vale to start his search there, when the train he was following came under attack by the very people he was searching for. It was a small group, surprising considering the company they were attacking, only about 5 of them. So to make matters simple, he helped. He knew that, thankfully, there were no humans on board and it was controlled and manned by robots. He didn't have any qualms about ripping them up. To make the story he thought of at least somewhat real, he had the Biju create an illusion over his whiskers that made them seem larger, more jagged, and about 3 years old. The White Fang members were obviously wary when a teen popped up from nowhere, but when they saw his face and the fact he was shooting the robot knights with them, they made a decision to stay their blade. It also helped the fact that they were losing before he came. After it was all done they thanked him but still kept their blades out. He asked if he could speak with the current leader. They all looked at each other before nodding and wagging his head. About an hour passed in silence as they took him somewhere. He couldn't smell it out and his touch was halted by 2 of the members. Sounds of talking and eating were cut short as the group entered the camp, carrying around a sacked person. More than a few were wondering what was happening, but none more than Adam Taurus and his chosen partner Blake Belladonna. They stepped out of the tent they occupied moments ago to face the group. Someone explain. Now, one of the members stepped in to report the job was successful. And truth be told, it was thanks to him. He looked at Blake and pointed his head at the hooded guy. Blake slid next to him. He helped the crew. Whether or not he knows who they are fully can be learned though. That as well as why. Taurus nodded and told them to remove the hood, only to be slightly enraged as it turned out to be a human. He was about to simply kill the blonde where he sat when he looked up, and behind him Blake gasped. On the blonde kid's face were 6 very jagged scars, 3 on each cheek, like whiskers. They looked only somewhat recently healed as well since they weren't completely sunken in his face. Taurus sighed. Even he, as merciless to humans he was, still felt sympathy for those that were on the receiving end of the racism that they crafted. So just this once, I'll hear you out. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. When I was younger I used to go to the White Fang rallies and support. One day my parents caught me and forbade me from ever going to another one. I wasn't going to listen, so I kept going. At one of the rallies someone had crippled the friend I was with, a fox faunus by the name of Kira. I flipped shit and started throwing punches at the guy. All I remember is the cops showing up and the next morning I am in jail. The guy who hurt Kira was free and Kira can never walk again. They did nothing to that man but decided to incarcerate a kid because he stood up for a friend. It was so fucked up and I was pissed. My parents came and got me but we moved so I couldn't go to another rally as I didn't feel safe without a friend. I had moved to Atlas about 4 years ago when I made some friends I thought were okay. So I decided to tell them about when I was in the White Fang before they. His breathing got shaky and his hands clenched and shook. Blake looked to him in sympathy. He was kinda like her. Being a part of the old White Fang before it became more radical. She only stayed because of Adam truthfully, but seeing how he hasn't changed like she hoped. Adam on the other hand was thinking. This kid, he helped out before new management and paid a price not needed. Yet even with how they were now he still seeked them out. It was strange but not fully unwelcome. Sure, he wanted to make Faunus rule supreme, but seeing humans, even if only one helped them. Naruto, I'm doing this because of a certain deal we have with someone else at the moment, but I am extending my hand to you. I am offering you a position with the White Fang. All members present were shocked, none more than Blake, but she was happy too. Another member spoke up, but he's a human. Taurus turned to the woman. Human he may be, but the heart of a faunus he has. Few humans would stand up with us when we were weak, yet he did. Now we are strong and the humans fear us, yet he sought us out. Whether it was bravery, stupidity, or hope I don't know. But what I do know is that while he may be human, his faunus heart shows and he stands with us. Everyone was quelled at that. Naruto was smiling with tears budding on his eyes. Adam walked behind him and uncut the bindings. He pulled Naruto along and grabbed Blake on the way back to the tent. They had an old member to catch up. 2 months later, it didn't even take a week for Naruto to be respected among the White Fang, though it was a shock to them that a human wanted to help and not subjugate them. He had grown close to Blake as she was his partner for most raids and espionage missions. Adam was always busy with other troops and he still didn't trust Naruto 100%. The fact he had any trust in him at all was surprising. Blake had become fast friends with Naruto. Maybe because of the feeling of him being an older member or his story, but either way she could say she was his friend. She was glad he also shared her view on killing needlessly, having only to incapacitate humans. She was surprised when one day Naruto had approached her. Blake, hey, can we talk? Being a healthy teen, she had delved into more, spicy literature. Not only that, but since there was a full moon and her thoughts had already been running rampant about her new male partner, she of course went straight into more dirty thoughts about the two. But before she could continue those thoughts, she saw his face as one of seriousness. So she squashed the fantasies she made and moved with him. They walked a few minutes away so no one would hear them. Naruto turned to look at her face. Blake, do you think what we're doing right now is right? Blake immediately clammed up. Of course she did. She was having that thought even before he came around. Now faced with the same question from a different source, she knew the answer. I used to think that it was yes, but now. She looked down at the forest floor. Naruto looked at her and made a split-second decision that hopefully wouldn't bite him in the ass. He pushed his fist out for her to bump. She stared at him. What am I supposed to do? Just bump fists, damn it. The cat bumped fists with the fox in her mind connected to his. Opening her eyes, she saw she was in a room that was completely white and endless. Where are we? My mind. She turned to see Naruto. She looked back around the room, then back to him. But how? The ninja sighed. I need to show you some things as well as tell you the truth. God, you're really gonna hate me for this, but I feel like you need to know. Blake was more than a little confused. I'll start with the worst of it first. That story I told you, it wasn't true. Not completely. Now it was time for Blake to sigh. I actually kinda figured that. Naruto blinked. Your story was mine, only I didn't have a friend get hurt. I went to every rally, every stand-in, every protest, never once did I see your mop of blonde before. Naruto looked down in sadness. Even with her resigned tone, he could hear the betrayal within it. Please let me finish. I need you to know the full story. She nodded her consent and he kept on. I am here on a mission by the Atlesian military to gain information on the White Fang, but after today, he shook his head. Like I said, my story wasn't completely fake. What I am about to show you is a memory. Just know that even if you try, you can't change anything, okay? She nodded, but it was hesitant. Naruto snapped his fingers and brought forth one of his worst memories. Of when he was 4 and didn't stay home on his birthday. Alright, so I know it's not canon. Confirmed that Naruto had any sort of physical torment made to him when he was younger, but for plot? Let's make it happen. K. Blake watched in horror as they held down a child and sliced his cheeks open, just as they were on the outside world. They cursed him, called him a demon, and beat him with whatever they could find. She was about to jump in when Naruto reminded her that it's a memory. She looked at him to see his stoic face. The memory came to a close as the men left his room and continued merrily as if they hadn't just almost killed a kid and destroyed his mind. Blake turned to him again, eyes full with tears cascading down her face, and she hugged him. He lightly held her for a few moments before she pulled back. Why? It's all she could say after seeing that. Because that friend of mine wasn't a lie either. Though his name is Kurama, not Kira. Blake turned and saw the form of a giant fox towering above her. She dropped her jaw and babbled. But why, how is he, can it, is it even? Naruto chuckled lightly at her reaction, tossing her head back and forth between demon and container. Kurama is a biju, I guess you could say demon that resides within me. We used to hate each other's guts, but some events happened about 8 months ago that caused us to be as we are now. And I'm glad for it too. Naruto looked at his giant pal who rolled his eyes. Yay, whatever Yasap. Hurry up and leave, I was napping. Naruto chuckled and touched Blake's forehead. The next second they disappeared. And reopened their eyes to see the forest surrounding them. Blake looked at him. Naruto, you. He avoided her eyes expecting the worst. You're just like the character in this book. And immediately lost his worry. In fact, he was happy enough to laugh, in which Blake soon joined. After a few moments the ninja looked at her. I am glad you don't hate me. Blake moved a little closer and hugged him. I don't think I even could. She backed off for a moment, then looked back at the ground. Do you remember that last mission we did? When we were leaving you said that I shouldn't hide my ears because they were cute. Naruto blushed lightly. Yay, he remembered it. He felt his palm open and a ribbon fall into his hand. He looked up and saw Blake with her cat ears on display. Blake, I'll try to keep them out. Okay? And only because I leave Blake. Naruto, let's move, we got another mission. Blake's confession would be cut short as Adam had moved near them. Blake sighed and moved to head back, but Naruto didn't. She looked back at him and caught his whispered, sorry, before he dashed out of the clearing, intent on returning to Atlas and report. She shut her eyes tight as she heard his steps echo out, counted to 10 then ran back to camp. She had to keep up appearances at least. She knew he needed that much. Within the next 5 minutes the whole of White Fang, even Adam, would be shocked. Though new and a human, they had been betrayed. Little did they know it wouldn't be the last betrayal. 1 week later, Naruto made it to Atlas in no time and rested first. Before sleeping he looked at the ribbon he held onto the entire run. He quickly tied it around his wrist and fell asleep. The next day he walked into Mr. Schnee's office and gave them the rundown of what had happened. General Ironwood sighed lightly. I see. Thank you, Naruto. You'll also be happy to know that Wise, while slightly angered with you, can't wait to see you at Beacon. What do you mean? I'm technically still enrolled at Signal and can't keep Kirao from telling them to withdraw me. The general smirked, though it seemed Mr. Schnee was less than thrilled at the mention of both schools and Kirao. The perk of doing favors, my dear boy. You may want to head back to Vale to get everything set. Naruto thanked them and left. Ironwood turned to Mr. Schnee. You know she feels for him, correct? Ironside sighed and began to leave. I swear you're just like the Uchiha he told me about. The next evening Naruto was back in Vale walking to the shared home he had with Kirao, Yang, and Ruby. He knocked on the door and a dejected Ruby opened it, not even looking at him. Hello? He hadn't told a pun in a long time. Ironwood and Wise got tired of it quickly. Blake only laughed at ones involving fish, and he hadn't said one to his pseudo-family since he got here. So he figured why waste the opportunity. He told this one to Ruby when they couldn't go get ammo for Crescent Rose. You know what they call a lazy kangaroo? Still dejected, a pouch potato. And she moved to close the door but stopped. A pouch potato? She looked back through the open door. Naru. The door almost flew off the hinges and smacked the wall as Ruby gained flight as her semblance and leapt at Naruto, almost knocking him down. You blonde dolt. Yang came through and did knock him down. They got up and brought him inside. Look, you caught us right before we left. I'm about to head into town for more info on Mom, and Ruby wanted to hit that dust shop. Wanna come with? I'll let you ride on my lap. Yang ended with a wink. Or, I can take Ruby cause I need to check something at the shop anyway. Yang raised an eyebrow. How do you plan on getting there? The ninja smirked and pointed out the window. Up the street there was a white and orange motorcycle just like Yang's. How'd you get that? That looks like an Atlesian motor. They all got up to leave. Remember, I had that thing that the general needed me to do. This is only part of his payback for it. Yang whistled and hopped onto her own bike, revving the engine as it turned over. Milk it for all it's worth, Naru. And with that she took off. The ninja chuckled, made sure Ruby held on and took off himself. The door chime rang out and Naruto ignored it thinking it was just another customer. This was the only Faunus-friendly shop in miles, and since it was late, he figured that they would be unseen. He was about to keep looking around when he felt the bad intentions that the little group was putting out. Not only that, but he caught sight of that damned orange hair. Love orange as he might, on Roman fucking Torchwick it did no justice. He ran into Roman a couple times when he was with the White Fang. He quickly learned that Roman wasn't the mastermind that Adam had been speaking of. No, that orange-haired idiot was too stupid and hot-headed, ironic coming from him. He was going to wait for when they left to confront them, but one of the goons made a move toward him and Ruby. He recognized the suits too. Damn it, Junior. You didn't become pseudo-siblings with Yang without finding the underground, which helped him. Except for the fact Junior's bodyguards had tried making a move. Stupid in romantics he is, but when you come up to him and practically slip your leg over his thigh, pieces fall together quickly. The sage slipped his hand stealthily behind his back and gripped the handle of the folded shingetsu. Ruby was too distracted listening to the music player he got her. Insert song. This Will Be the Day, by Casey Lee Williams. He stepped next to her and bumped her shoulder lightly with his, getting her to look at him. She blushed lightly at their closeness before she saw his face. Hey kids, put your hands in the air. They looked over to the goon. Ruby pulled her headphones down and music blasted through the air. Naruto shook his head. I swear she's going to go deaf. Though Ruby's response was much more reasonable. Huh? The goon's eye twitched and the sage could feel the annoyance. I said get your hands in the air. What, you got a death wish or something? Ruby looked at Naruto then back at the goon. Are you robbing us? The goon waved his hands in a duh motion. The girl nodded her head and a smirk grew on her lips. Ooh. Roman was leaning on the counter when he saw one of the men he got from Junior fly next to the rest of the group. He raised an eyebrow and sent another over there, this one with a gun. The sound of him smashing through the front window drew his attention. He and the group looked out to see a small girl in a red, black dress and red hooded cape began to stand. The weapon she had on her shoulder beginning to extend, a scythe. Roman's heart shuddered a moment. It had to be a fucking scythe. Images of the only human to gain respect in the White Fang flashed in his head. He came close to being dead, more than he liked when that blonde was around. Considering he insulted his partner at the time, most would say it was called for. Ruby fully extended her crescent rose, spun it a couple times and stabbed the tip in the ground. She then gripped her headphones and turned the music off. End song. Roman sighed. He had a bad feeling, but if the queen didn't get what she wanted, he looked to the goons. Oop tilde, get her. And the rest of them ran out. He was about to start picking up the dust to follow them out when blonde hair filled his vision and this time his whole body shuddered. Before him stood that fucking blonde, wearing a simple short-sleeved black cloak, a burnt orange shirt, khaki cargo pants, and his patented ninja sandals. Roman, you just don't know when to quit, do you? Roman was about to say fuck it all and run, but the little deal they had with the Fang was still going strong. Kid, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be back with the kitty and the bull? Naruto let a grin slip on his face. Oh fuck. Oh, so they didn't tell your little group? Well, that makes this more fun then. I fucking left the Fang. Not only that, I wasn't even a part of it to begin with. I was doing it for a friend that someone there tried to strike against. With that, Roman put FEAR into effect. Fuck everything and run. While Roman and Naruto's conversation was about to start, Ruby had been taking care of the help. One of the men charged at her and swiped. Using the leverage of her scythe's weight, she hefted herself up to the swing passed under her. She swung her body and dual kicked him in the face, sending him flying. Using the momentum, she pulled Crescent Rose from the ground and landed on the ground. The other idiots, thinking that since she had her back turned to them, they could charge her. Too bad for them, she saw this coming and using the other portion of her scythe, shot a bullet. She spun and using the blunt end of the back of her scythe, hit one and sent him flying into the air. Using the momentum from the swing, she continued to spin and smack the scythe down onto another of the goons, making a small crater from the impact. Out of the corner of her eye, Ruby saw another goon raise a gun and about to fire. She quickly lifted the scythe along with her feet and shot another bullet. The recoil of the high-caliber round sent her flying down the street. She had to do it twice more as the goon kept his aim just behind her. On her last shot, she jumped in front of him and slid the goon's feet out from under them, the speed sending him into the air. Ruby stabbed the scythe into the ground and used the momentum to swing around and kick the goon, almost making him land on Roman. Roman, who just got out of the shop, saw the goon land near his feet. You were worth every cent. Truly, you were. He stepped forward and dropped his cigar. Well, Red, I believe we can say that this was indeed an eventful evening. I even met an old acquaintance. Using his cane he pressed the end of the smoking cigar out. As much as I would love to stick around, the criminal raised said cane and it turned out that it was actually a barrel. A sight popped up from the end. This is where we part ways. A shot of fire dust flew out of the barrel. Ruby had to quickly aim crescent rows downward and shoot again to avoid being hit in the explosion she knew was going to happen. Naruto walked out of the dust shop, after paying the owner for the window and apologizing, to see said explosion and Roman booking it up a ladder. The girl in red landed and saw her blonde companion come outside. She glanced around and didn't see the man she just got shot at by until she followed Naruto's eyesight and saw Roman climbing like a monkey. The owner of the shop came out and Naruto asked if he would be alright by himself. As soon as left his lips, Naruto turned to Ruby. Let's go, Rubes. Just as Roman reached the top of the ladder, the sound of a bullet firing reached his ears and he had to stop as the little girl he had to deal with was calling out to him. Persistent, lighter steps landed beside her and the blonde stood next to her, still not having drawn his own weapon. Naruto's ears heard the sound of a VTOL rising in the air and it proved correct as one flew up besides the building in front of Roman. A spotlight turned on and shone on the two hunters in training. The orange-haired idiot hopped onto the craft and turned, end of the line read, Blondie. He drew a fire dust crystal from his pocket and threw it at them, skidding to a stop in front of Ruby. He threw his cane up and fired. Naruto was about to use his scythe to block the explosion from Ruby when a blonde woman landed in front of them. Just after, smoke covered his vision. Whoa, ha ha ha. Roman stepped back with his laugh, but stopped when he saw a purple pattern. In front of the two kids was a blonde woman that looked like a teacher, complete with glasses and dress shirt, a writing crop held in her left hand raised. Naruto knew this woman. Kurama mentioned her and showed him pictures once. Glinda Goodwitch, assistant headmaster at Beacon. Naruto stole a glance at Ruby and already saw stars in her eyes. The woman let her barrier drop and hummed lightly. She pushed her glasses up and swung the crop back, letting a stream of purple arrow-like energies dash at the VTOL, most landing and sending the plane into a small frenzy to stay stable. Roman growled and went to the "We got a huntress." The woman manning the VTOL was wearing a red dress with golden embroideries and had black hair in a light ponytail that fell to one side of her shoulder. She got up and let Roman take the reins. Outside, Glinda built up some of her aura and shot it into the sky just above the craft. A storm of energy formed from the area and began to rain large ice pellets onto the ship as the huntress threw her arm down. The woman manning the VTOL before walked to the opening Roman was at before and Naruto got the opportunity to feel her power. What the fuck? That feels like Ruby. But, if what Kurama told me was true then that means she— The ninja glanced at Glinda and saw her narrow her eyes. She knew this woman. Naruto retrained his eyes on the woman with Roman and she looked at him. She had eyes like Danzo, the ones that always plan ahead and try to think of everything. Guess this is Queen, huh? Naruto felt the energy the woman on the ship started to form before it showed. The gold on her dress lit up like fire as a flame danced in her hand. She traced her arm a moment and threw her palm forward and shot the fire at them. Glinda was quick to react, however, and erected another barrier in front of them. Some of the flame looked as though it turned to liquid at the last second and hit the ground. The woman threw her hand up and the roof below Glinda's feet lit up. The huntress back flipped as the spot she was just at exploded like a nova, landing next to the blonde and red kids. The debris that was falling stopped its movement as she stood up. Glinda twisted her arm in a circle formation and made a spear. She reared back her arm as though she had grabbed it and threw it at the aircraft. The woman inside knew what was coming, however, and reared her own arm back and let loose a few streams that broke apart the construct. Glinda twisted her aim though and made what was left of the spear aim for the cockpit. Inside, Roman saw the spear coming for him and turned the craft so that the debris slid across the top of the roof, flying back in the sky in pieces. They came back together to form tendrils that encircled the plan. The woman inside the craft saw this and smirked lightly. She crossed her arms over her chest, palms out. A strange seal formed around her body and she threw her arms back out. An AoE formed over the plane and blew the remaining debris away from it. Ruby, feeling a little left out, began shooting at the woman with her weapon. The lady inside just deflected them with ease using only her hand. She swung her arm out and portals began to form underneath them all. Naruto used the other half of his semblance, reached his hand out and grabbed Ruby and Glinda, pushing them back from the spot they were on. Ruby fell from never having felt forced movement from another, and Glinda landed lightly on her feet. The sage looked over and saw the plane begin to leave, the woman inside throwing him a smirk as the door was about to close. He held his hand out like a gun and threw it back like he shot something. Behind him, a malformed skull appeared and energy began to gather inside its mouth. Glinda showed a medium reaction of surprise at the weird skull. Ruby on the other hand grew excited. She loved the way his semblance worked. I mean, a weapon forming from nowhere? How could she not? The skull opened its mouth and shot out a silver-gray beam that raced toward the ship, clipping its left engine, sending it into partial turmoil until Roman regained control and sped them off. Before the door closed, Naruto caught one last look at the woman and saw her eyes narrowed, but that smirk maybe even grew wider. Naruto sighed as he lowered his hand. He'll get his answers sooner or later. Ruby took the silence as her opportunity. You're a huntress? Glinda took her eyes off the blonde boy beside her to the redhead. Immediately Ruby went fangirl and a giant smile spread on her lips as she brought her hands up to her face. Can I have your autograph? The smile she had about 10 minutes earlier was non-existent now as she sat in the police interrogation room listening to the lady lecture her and Naruto about getting involved. The actions of you two have put yourselves and others in great danger. Ruby's childish, they started it, got a chuckle from him, along with her pouting face at him. Glinda walked past them and started again. If it were up to me, you two would go home with a pat on the back. Ruby and Glinda smiled while Naruto kept stoic. He knew there was more. He was proven right when the woman pulled her riding crop out and smacked the table, both of their smiles now gone, and a slap on the wrist. Ruby yelped and pulled her hand away. Glinda sighed and started to walk to a corner. But, there is someone here who wants to meet you both. Out of the dark door, a tall man with gray hair and spectacles walked out, wearing a greenish suit-like uniform. He also held a mug and plate of cookies, which Naruto and Ruby's eye immediately flew to. Naruto already felt he knew who the guy was. Ruby rose. He leant down to look at her face. You have silver eyes. Naruto snorted, drawing everyone's attention, and the man's eyes widened slightly. Ruby felt a little awkward from the guy saying that, so she just let out a silent hum. The gray-haired man stood, and behind him, Glinda held a scroll playing back the feed of Ruby fighting the goons. Naruto smiled, seeing how easier she made it look. She had come far from when she had been learning with him. So, the man started, where did you learn to do this? Ruby glanced at her friend and saw the light smile he wore. Along with a nod she answered him, Signal Academy. Glinda kept her stoic face, though you could see her raised brow. The man, however, seemed a bit sterner. They taught you to use one of the most dangerous weapons ever designed? Ruby shifted in her seat a little. Well, one teacher in particular. The man nodded, I see. He sat the cookies down and Ruby reached for one hesitantly. Popping one in her mouth, she looked over at Naruto. She glanced back at the dish and tried to stuff them all in her mouth. Ah, Rubes, save me a few. The man let a light smile crawl onto his face and saw that Glinda had one as well. It's just that I've only seen one other scythe wielder of that skill before. Heard he had taught another, but I certainly do remember only seeing that dusty old crow work like that. Ruby smiled, her mouth full. Thash Mew uncle. The gray-haired man laughed along with Naruto, whom she shot a pout at. She swallowed the cookies in her mouth. Sorry, that's my uncle Kirao. He's a teacher at Signal. I was garbage before he took me under his wing. She glared lightly at the whistling blonde next to her, though someone had a much easier time learning than I had. But, now I'm all like Fu, Wada. Oh. While making sounds she acted out as though she were making karate moves. Naruto mused that it was quite cute. The man stared for a moment, so I've noticed. He sat his mug down and put his hands on the table. And what is it that such an adorable girl, such as you, doing at a school designed to train warriors? Naruto would scoff a little, but then he remembered how shit the academy was. For the first time in a while the sage saw a serious Ruby. Well, I want to be a huntress. The gray-haired man looked at her. You want to slay monsters? A light smile was put onto her face. Yay, Naruto. The gray-haired man and Glinda's eyes went to the blonde and he felt as though they were about to push him out of his seat. And I only have a couple years left at Signal, and then we were going to apply to Beacon. It was at this time Naruto knew she was about to start rambling like usual when she feels a bit awkward. So he saved her, by embarrassing her. She thinks that it's, in her words, super cool, super exciting, and super romantic. The redhead blushed and smacked his arm. Naru. Glinda blinked blankly a couple times and the man stared at them. Do you two know who I am? Ruby ducked her head a little but kept eye contact. You're Professor Ozpin, the headmaster at Beacon. He grunted lightly. Hello. Ruby put her smile back on. Nice to meet you. Ozpin leaned in a little. You want to come to my school? Ruby nodded her head. More than anything. Ozpin glanced at the witch beside him and she grunted and looked back at Naruto, who just blinked and smiled. The headmaster of Beacon chuckled a little. Well, okay. Ruby's eyes and smile widened up at that, though she felt bad, leaving Naruto behind. She looked over at him and saw his smile, real one that followed his eyes. Those shining dark blue eyes that always pulled her eye, getting off track Ruby. But what about Naruto? Said Ninja looked at her. Rubes, don't worry about me, okay? The way things are at school I don't think I'd be able to get into Beacon anyway. Not unless it was all combat-oriented. True, his already huge ninja prowess made him a monster to fight against. Luckily, no one there except Kirao, Ruby, and Yang knew about it all. Except the Biju, of course. Only Kirao knew them all. Blake knows of Kurama, fucking Kira, why that name? I wonder how she is now anyway. I hope she left and is alright. He had told some of his past to Ironwood and Weiss when he got to know them better. At least he knew he would see Weiss, Yang, and Ruby at B. Whoops, I know I forgot something to tell them. Didn't want to break it here. Ruby looked at him, but Naru. Ruby, trust me, I'll be fine. I'll be there in a couple years and it'll seem even shorter if you don't think about it. Okay? Ruby looked down and nodded. God, she was probably gonna kill him when he talked to her tomorrow. Ozpin saw the talk and figured it was time for his and Naruto's turn. Ms. Rose. Why don't you head home and get everything set? Ruby got up and nodded, hugging Naruto before she left. When the door closed, the atmosphere of the room became tense. Glinda was standing at a much less relaxed posture than before, though Ozpin was like normal. You didn't tell her? The sage shook his head. Nah, it'll be a good surprise for her when I'm on the ship with her. The old hunter nodded lightly, and then took a sip from his mug. Now then, Mr. Uzumaki. Ozpin's gaze intensified. What does the power of the maidens feel like? Ooh, I can't believe my baby sister is going to Beacon with me. Yang had a death grip on said sister. This is the best day ever. The strangled sound of, please stop, left Ruby's lips since she couldn't breathe. Yang dropped her and stepped lightly in front of her, bouncing on her heels. But I'm so proud of you, Tilda. Ruby seemed dejected. Really sis, it was nothing. What do you mean it was nothing? Yang glanced around. Everyone at Beacon is gonna think you're the bee's knees. Ruby sighed. She loved Yang, but sometimes she doesn't get it. I don't want to be the bee's knees. I don't want to be any kind of knees. I just want to be a normal girl with normal knees. What's with you? Aren't you excited? Of course I'm excited. It's just I don't want to seem special. Not only that, but I feel like we left out Naruto. Yang flinched at that. She had been close with Naruto, sure, but her sister took to him more than her. He and Yang were like siblings. Acted almost the same, were completely badass, loved pranks. It was like he was her from another dimension. Ruby though, she was with him more than her. Ruby had the chance to see him more than Yang did and discern the feelings she had. Even as teasing as she was, this was one subject she wouldn't hit. Not now at least. Leave out who? Both girls turned and saw the blonde they were just speaking of standing there with a smile. Ruby's face turned megawatt as she slammed into him. Naru, he chuckled and caught her. He glanced up at Yang and saw her smirking, but it was lighter. Ruby let go of Naruto and he turned and hugged Yang. Ay. They let out at the same time like the fawns. Ruby, though happy, was up in his face the next second, glaring at him. Naruto had to take a gulp as the righteous fury was palpable. What are you doing here? I mean, don't think I'm not happy, I am, but what about Signal? How did you get on here? When did you get on here? What's Uncle Kirao gonna think? She had started out strong but soon grew worried and panicky. Rubes, she looked up at him. I'll explain it all when we get to Beacon, okay? Just know that I am supposed to be here. She nodded and hugged him one more time. The robbery was led by one Roman Torchwick. Everyone glanced at the screen on the airship they were in to see a mugshot of said man. Naruto scowled lightly. That man was gonna be a thorn in his side even more, especially after last night. Back to you, Lisa. Thank you, Cyril. In other news, this Saturday's Faunus civil rights protest turned dark when members of the White Fang disrupted the ceremony. Naruto flinched lightly. He really hoped that Blake was out of there. The screen got cut and Glinda appeared. Yang looked at the woman. Who's that? The woman and Naruto answered at the same time. My name is Glinda Goodwitch. Yang did a little nod. Oh. Said Witch did a little introduction speech, speaking of how they were in an incredible time of peace. Naruto shook his head slightly. Don't tell them the truth and they won't be prepared. Glinda's hologram disappeared and everyone ran to the windows. Outside you could see the whole city. Ruby put her face to the glass. Look, you can see signal from here. Guess we're not far from home after all. Yang put her arms around her sister and brother figure. Beacons are home now. Ugh. They turned and saw the sorry sight of a blond boy dragging his feet past them. A little bit of puke dribbling out of his mouth. Yang made a face. Well, I guess the view isn't for everyone. Naruto detached himself to help the other blond boy. Ruby looked at him leave and turned to her sister. Well, it was a nice moment while it lasted. Wonder who we're gonna meet. Yang mumbled under her breath. I just hope they're better than Vomit Boy. Her musing was cut short when Ruby screamed out, Yang. Gross, you have puke on your shoe. Gross, 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 gross. Get away from me, I don't want it on me. Stop it. The airship the students had landed at the docking station for Beacon. During the rest of the flight, after Naruto had helped the blonde kid out, he sat down with Ruby and Yang in silence. He had been thinking about his semblance. The first thing he realized was that it was immensely powerful. He had got it to work after getting frustrated trying to mold the chakra in his mindscape. He remembered throwing his arms down and screaming in frustration. Saiken was about to comfort him when he saw the malformed skull form and had to move as the beam raced toward him. Naruto had profusely apologized, but it wasn't a big deal. Everyone was fine and Naruto had finally figured out what had happened with his chakra. The other thing was how incomplete it felt. He activated it the first time was when he was angered but didn't want to rely on anger to fire it. So he did as always and trained to just make it from whenever he needed it to. After the whole Kirao experience, when he almost killed him, he gained a new ability from his semblance. Considering there's only supposed to be one per person, it was weird he had gained the telekinetic ability. Though he was glad for the ability when he saved Ruby and Glinda, though they probably could have handled it. But what did that mean? He gained 2 new abilities at the cost of all his chakra. Not only his but the Biju lost theirs as well. The aura they gained being what sustained them now. Does that mean when he connects with them that he'll, oh look, there's my friends, bye. Apparently Yang had left them so Ruby can try to get some friends. It took her too long to make some at signal when he wasn't there. While not agreeing with Yang's method, he had to say that maybe this time it was effective. He could feel that someone's presence coming up. I need to go talk to Ozpin, Rubes, see ya. Wait, Naru, not you too. She sat in silence for a moment as he left. I don't know where to go or what to do. Ruby sighed and spun in her spot, falling back onto a cart with suitcases. Naruto felt bad about it, but she needed some experience without him there. A couple minutes of walking later, he heard an explosion from behind him. He just knew it was Ruby. He came to Ozpin talking with Glinda. Look, you both have questions for me that you want to confirm from Kirao. But I have my own questions as well. Naruto extended his aura and felt it. Like why there is a power matching that of the woman we fought last night under the school. Ozpin didn't seem shocked, but Glinda did. Though she was also scandalized that some kid had been so rude. Listen here, young Ma Glinda. She was interrupted as Ozpin took a step forward. If we want his help, he can't be in the dark. Glinda stopped. The headmaster turned to him. I will explain everything after the introduction ceremony. Naruto nodded. He can wait till then. On the other hand, Ozpin continued, we are actually tall one student. Since I added Ruby at the last moment and you were, honestly, somewhat planned. There will be one team with an extra member, you. May as well just put me with Weiss then. I have a feeling that certain someone who wanted her dead will be right back at it. Power is easier to feel than intent unless I use other means I may explain later. But there are pockets of dark intent I felt on the way here. Ozpin listened to him as they walked to the theater. We will see about getting you on Weiss's team. The way things are planned this year is different than what we did a few years ago. They got to the entrance of the auditorium and Naruto left after he saw Yang and Ruby. Though when he saw the white hair of Weiss and tense atmosphere around them, he decided against it and simply stood off to the side. The sound of Ozpin on stage clearing his throat helped him sneak past them. I'll keep this brief. You have traveled here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills. And when you are finished, you plan to dedicate your lives to the protection of the people. But I look amongst you, and all I see is wasted energy. In need of purpose of direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time here will prove that knowledge will only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step. Ozpin began to walk off stage after he caught Naruto's eyes. Glinda stepped up knowing that the two were going to go beneath the school. You will gather in the ballroom tonight. Tomorrow your initiation begins. Be ready. You are dismissed. She soon joined the three. Ruby saw them walk up to someone in the back and when she saw who it was, called out to him. Naruto. He looked up and waved to her with a smile. He also saw that Weiss had widened her eyes and shot her gaze to him, a smile on her face. He mouthed a, "We'll talk later," to her as Ozpin and Glinda got to him and began walking out. Of course with Ruby's shout almost everyone heard. Especially Faunus. A certain black-haired cat who had retied a bow over her ears jumped up in search, but didn't catch him as he had already left. It took Weiss a second to think of it but she came back to, "Wait, how do you know Naruto?" She turned her gaze at the small redhead, who began to feel small. Yang took over though, considering we lived with him for 6 months I hope we know him. Our uncle Kirao took him in when he first moved here. Not a complete lie. Weiss however was petrified. Naruto? Lived with them? Longer than with her? They must feel like family. I just yelled at his little sister then. She didn't know how they felt about each other so it was a logical assumption. But, why did he never mention you? Yang and Ruby looked at each other. There was only one thing that stopped most of the blonde's thoughts. Was he training most of the time? A nod? Welp, that's why. That blonde idiot, when he gets training on the brain, everything else goes to black around him. Yang straightened, though the guy up there, he seemed kind of off. Ruby continued for her, it's almost like he wasn't even there. John the blonde, vomit boy, from earlier had taken that moment to step in. I'm a natural blonde you know. Weiss put her hand on her head. Why did I say anything? It was night now, and all the students had gathered in the ballroom. Naruto had gone with Ozpin and Glinda earlier down to the vault to see her, Amber, the one who was supposed to be the current fall maiden. It seems that Kirao was the one to find her being attacked by that lady from earlier. Naruto's got some more questions the next time he sees him. I'm not certain, but I might have a way to help her. That got their attention. And how, Mr. Uzumaki, do you intend to do that? If Kirao trusted you enough with the Fall Maiden, enough to where he told you some things about me, I can delve a bit more into it. Naruto held his fists out. And they stared at him. Bump my fists damn it, doing so lead them to his mind. They looked around in silence at the blank expanse of white. Seiken. Before them, the six-tailed slug Biju formed. Glinda made a face and Ozpin just blinked. As a huntsman he must have seen some shit. Hello, Naruto, Mr. Ozpin, Ms. Glinda. The ever-kind and formal one Seiken was. I'm not sure. As recent to this world as we are, I haven't had the real opportunity to explore the abilities of aura and all its properties. Remember we thought we had your semblance as it's called figured out until you gained that other ability. Naruto nodded in understanding. If I could make a clone I'd let you use one, but I still haven't figured out how to do it. If I even can anymore. He took a thinking stance, Glinda and Ozpin off to the side alternating between the two. Biju chakra is normally corrosive. However when Kurama and I were in sync it never hurt. I wonder if Seiken and I can do something like that yet. I would try Kurama but he's probably asleep. That and Seiken is a better healer overall. Naruto kept running his chin. So it may not be now but I might be able to help this Amber. All I have to do is get Seiken and I to a level Kurama and I had. That will take time though. Time I'm not sure I really have. He looked at the three in his head. I think I may have a way but I'm not 100% on it. Seiken, if we get in sync do you think the healing properties of your bubbles could help? The slug wiggled lightly, Glinda, Ewing, softly, at the question. It may be possible. But that will take time to do. Will the lady be okay for about a year? Looking at the two hunters they seemed as though they think she would, so after acknowledging that they talked about everything that needed an answer, Naruto walked into the ballroom to see Yang looking at some of the boys. Then John walks into her sight and he hears the "you" fly from her lips and laughed, the laugh drawing people's attention, 6 people in particular. "Yo, bro, over here," Yang called to him. He had just changed himself, so he was wearing a simple orange shirt and gray shorts. Yang was wearing her undershirt and shorts, while Ruby, who was next to her, was wearing a black tank top and pink sleep pants. He felt eyes on him, but they didn't move, so he didn't acknowledge them. Though one set very, very familiar. He plopped down next to Ruby and saw her writing. Yang peeked over as well. "What's that?" Ruby looked up from her writing. "It's a letter for the gang back at Signal. I told them I would write and say how it's going." "That's so cool, Tilda." Ruby blushed and her pillow met the blonde girl's face. "Shut up." The redhead shifted a bit. "I didn't get to bring my friends to school with me. It's weird not knowing anyone here." Yang was still smiling, however. "What about Johnny's? Nice. There you go, +1 friend. 100% increase." Ruby sighed and laid her back on the sleeping bag. "Yay, but Weiss." Naruto looked at her with a raised eyebrow when she didn't finish. "What about Weiss? You were both standing with her when I came by the auditorium earlier." Ruby blushed and covered her face. Yang was snickering. Apparently baby sis caused them to explode. Ruby's cat pillow met her face this time. Naruto was shaking his head, mumbling out, "Knew it. I knew it." The redhead sighed. "Weiss is considered a negative friend now. Back to 0. Naruto smiled a little. "Ah, don't worry Rubes, you'll be her friend eventually." Yang wasn't as optimistic. "There's no such thing as negative friends." "Oh, maybe he was Ro. You just made an enemy." No, he was right. He turned to Ruby. "Hey, look, it has only been 1 day. Give it some time, alright? Friends are here, you just haven't met them yet." Ruby sat up suddenly and stared at someone. Yang and Naruto turned their gaze to the person and Naruto's heart leapt. She left them. She got out. He didn't hear Yang and Ruby talking anymore. He got up and began to walk over to her. Yang saw this and grabbed Ruby. "See? Naruto is up for it, come on." Light steps ended in front of her and she glanced up from her book only to catch his scent, see his face, and hear his voice. "Blake, you covered them up." She couldn't breathe. She knew he was here, but what? What was she expecting, for him to completely ignore her? No, that wasn't him. Even if the story he used to get in was a lie, his personality wasn't. All she could do was nod. She was about to ask how he was here when Yang's voice called out to them. "Heelu." She was still pulling on Ruby, who wanted to be quite away from here. She got in front of the two and pushed Ruby ahead of her. "I believe you two may know each other." Blake took her eyes off Naruto. "Aren't you the girl that exploded?" Ruby sighed. "That was gonna stick forever." Haha, yeah." She stuck her hand out and introduced herself, but Blake just looked back to her book. Ruby pulled her hand away. Naruto sighed. This was not going in Rube's favor. When the sisters looked at each other, he stealthily and lightly elbowed her. She raised her brow and he gave the, "at least try," look. The cat sighed and looked back at the two. "My name is Blake." The red and blonde girls turned their gaze back to Blake and smiled widely. "So, what y'all doing?" Okay, Ruby and Yang were grasping at straws now. Blake stared at them for a moment, like she couldn't believe the blonde had asked. "Reading?" Yang looked away. "Yay, lost cow, what's it about?" Ruby had interrupted her. Blake looked at her. "Huh?" Ruby smiled at her. "Your book, does it have a name?" The reading girl lowered the book a little. "Well, it's about a man with 2 souls." She looked over at the blonde boy next to her, seeing his softly smiling face. Both fighting for control over his body. Yang looked a little weirded out. "Oh, that's real lovely." Ruby didn't seem to mind though as she stepped forward. "I love books. Yang used to read stories to me before bed. Stories of heroes, monsters." She looked up, nostalgic. "They're one of the reasons I want to become a huntress." Blake smiled though it didn't seem genuine. "Why is that? Hoping you'll live happily ever after?" Naruto whispered low enough so only she would hear. "Blake, come on, please try." Ruby didn't look miffed though. "Well, I'm hoping we all will." She had Blake's attention. "As a girl, I wanted to be just like the heroes in those books. To be someone who fought for what was right, and protected those who couldn't protect themselves." That hit a chord in the sage. Everything he had done in life, while for recognition, was also to protect those at home, all of his homes. The one he made with the people of Wave, with the Sand Kids after he helped Gaara, then after defending it from Akatsuki, Konoha. Blake put her book in her lap. That's very ambitious for a child. She looked to the side, catching a glimpse of Naruto's slightly frowned face. Unfortunately, the real world isn't the same a fairy tale. Ruby still didn't look upset, in fact, she was smiling. Well, that's why we're here, to make it better. Naruto smiled. Ruby, you don't even know how strong you are. Yang was more vocal about how she felt. Oh, I'm so proud of my baby sister. The blonde girl scooped Ruby up in a back-breaking hug. The redhead didn't want that, and with a "let go," she threw a punch that delved them both into a brawl. Naruto shook his head. They might as well have been full-blooded siblings with how they acted. Blake tried speaking out but got cut off as someone else called out. What is going on over here? Weiss walked over in an off-blue sleep dress. Naruto smiled up at her. Hello again, Weiss. She stopped her would-be tell-off when she saw him again. Her face couldn't hold a mean look anymore and she smiled. Hey, you blonde dolt. Ruby held her sister's foot but let go when the heiress spoke to him. Oh wait, that's right, you know each other. Weiss looked at the sisters. Yay. Her gaze immediately turned sour as she stared back at him with anger. He had to hold back the gulp, although he left, and I didn't find anything out until about a week ago. I knew I'd meet you again though. It's why I left Riaderpalash with you. Speaking of, you were using it, weren't you? He only left to help her anyway. Some teasing was due. The heiress's face lit up. How did you know? Naruto cupped his chin. Someone always knows when their weapons are used. Ruby cupped her own chin, nodding sagely. Weiss shook her head. That's not why I came over here. She threw her gaze back at the sisters. Don't you realize people are trying to sleep? Naruto shook his head. They were just arguing now, getting louder. He looked over at Blake about to blow the candle out and smirked. This may be funny. She blew the light out and thunks and curses flew from the trio of girls' lips as they stumbled over themselves. He waited until Yang, Ruby, and Weiss had fallen asleep and looked over at Blake still reading in the dark. He nudged her a little and motioned her to follow him outside. The door lightly creaked but didn't wake anyone. The cold out didn't bother the two. Blake looked at her old partner. What did you need? She kind of had a feeling what he wanted though. Naruto looked at her with a smile. You left. He slipped a pout on his face, though you put another ribbon on them. She blushed lightly and looked down. What happened that made you leave? The cat sighed. Adam actually. He had been acting different way before you came. When the Fang fell under new management he changed way too fast, like he wanted it this way. He grew violent and when we began attacking, he killed people instead of knocking them out. She sighed and leaned up against the wall. Before you came I had thoughts about leaving. When you arrived and he accepted you, even if it was because of those other people, I thought he was changing back. That was proven wrong though. So when you came to me that day and asked if what we were doing was right, I knew I had my answer. I left the next day when he wanted to blow up the train we were meant to hijack even though everyone was in the last few carts. Naruto growled, that bastard. He was as bad as Madara. If they're not useful, kill them. So how'd you get into Beacon? Did you apply like normal? Blake smiled. Actually I ran into Ozpin. We were briefed on hunters we might encounter after we started to become more aggressive, so I recognized him right away. He made the offer for me to come if I gave him information about the Fang. The ninja nodded his head. He walked in front of Blake and hugged her. She froze for a moment before returning it with some force. I'm glad you're out of there, Blake. It didn't seem like that place suited you. They let go. Now come on, it's gonna be a big day tomorrow. They walked back inside and said goodnight. Naruto padded over to the sisters and pat their head. He walked to Weiss and did the same. He had to stifle a laugh as she leaned into the touch. He finally went back to his own sleeping bag and quickly fell asleep. After all he and Saiken still had work to do. The blonde war hero had to hold back punching whoever got in his face. He could tell they didn't mean anything bad but attempting to get in a ninja's personal space while they slept usually ended badly. He opened his eye to see a girl with short orange hair and light blue eyes, a white battle dress with pink skirt, shorts. Though as soon as he saw the girl's hair he made up his mind. Your hair is awesome as fuck. We're going to be best friends, I promise you that. The girl just blinked her eyes and a smile that looked like it would break her face popped up. That works for me, Blondie. As quick as she appeared she left, leaning over a boy over to his right who sighed as soon as she spoke, dragging him off to who knows where. Throughout the whole morning he saw her animatedly talking to the kid with a pink streak in his hair. If he didn't know any better he would have called him Sasuke. But no one could be like that prick. That, and while it seemed like this, Ren didn't answer all of the girl's questions, he did at least talk to her, even had a smile on his face every once in a while. In the locker rooms they had stored their weapons. Naruto was thinking back on the conversation he had with Glinda and Ozpin. While Glinda was more hesitant to answer questions, the gray-haired headmaster had been more than happy, especially after he answered some questions of his own. Especially like how he ended up here. He opened the locker and looked to his right to see Weiss talking with a rather tall, almost as tall as him, girl with hair like his mother. She had a gladiatorial look to her and he felt as though he should know her. He also looked over their shoulder to see Yang and Ruby talking, though the short redhead didn't seem too happy with her sister. His thoughts got interrupted when John slipped himself between Weiss and the redhead. "Ya know what else is great? Me, John Arc, nice to meet you." Admittedly, Naruto snorted lightly at the suave attempt. While she might have opened up to him fast, Weiss was still very adamant against people like John. The heiress shook her head. "Not you again." The ninja slid up next to her. "Come on, Weiss. At least say hello back." The other blonde boy smiled at the help. "Then you can crush his dreams of getting on the same team as you." The ninja chuckled lightly as the boy grew a rain cloud over his head. Naruto slapped his shoulder lightly. "I'm just messing with ya. Besides, I think someone else here might want to be on the same team as you." He turned the arc boy to the redhead who smiled prettily. "Hello." She stuck her hand out to him. "I'm Pira Nico's." Naruto finally got it. "Ooh, you're invincible girl. Hey, after this can we spar?" Naruto pushed the other blonde away from her. Ironic considering he put him there in the first place. Pira nodded with her smile, and then looked back to the other blonde boy who was in a heap with swirls in his eyes. Naruto glanced down. Whoops. Weiss poked on his arm to get his attention. "Do you want Rieterpalash back now? If not, then can I keep using it?" Naruto smirked lightly. Seems she grew attached to his weapon. Okay, that thought came out wrong. "Sure, you can hang on to it. Besides," he leaned to whisper in her ear, drawing a blush from the heiress, "don't let the others know, but we're gonna be on the same team. A deal I made with Ozpin." He pulled back to see her smiling. She was about to say something but got cut off as the speakers came to life. "Will all first-year students report to Beacon Cliff for initiation? Repeat, all first-year students report to Beacon Cliff." Having already gotten dressed in his hunter attire, which pretty much consisted of what he wore a couple days ago at the store, Naruto reached into the locker and gripped the folded scythe rifle and slipped it into his lower back and headed out with the rest of the students. On the cliffside, Ozpin and Glinda waited. When everyone was there they had them all stand in a line. Ozpin sipped from his mug as he looked at them all. "For years you have trained to become warriors. Today your abilities will be tested here, at the Emerald Forest." Naruto almost snorted. Seriously, how close were these two worlds? I mean, giant animals in a forest that will most likely kill you? Forest of Death, anyone? Glinda pushed her glasses up. "Now I'm sure that many of you have been hearing rumors of team assignments. Well, this will put those rumors to rest. You will all be given teammates. Today." To his right the ninja heard Ruby's little "oh." He felt bad for her, but she needed to meet new people. Ozpin continued where his assistant left off. "These teammates will be with you for the rest of your stay here at Beacon. So it is in your best interest to be paired with someone you can work well with." Another groan from Ruby. "That being said, the first person you meet eyes with down there will be your partner for the next 4 years." Naruto felt and heard Ruby's feeling on the matter when she screamed out a "what?" Along with that orange-haired girl, "I told you so." However, there is an exception. Many raised an eyebrow hoping for a loophole. Due to the uneven numbers that this year has, Naruto Uzumaki will be put on an already predetermined team regardless of who has met his eyes. That being said, when you get your partner, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path, or you will die. John let out a small nervous chuckle, and if one were to look at the orange-haired Nora, they would see a giant open-mouthed smile. Naruto shivered for an odd reason, as though someone could claim his destructive title from him. "You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. The sage nodded. If they didn't learn to fight for themselves, then they may end up in some really bad situations. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path that contains several relics. Each pair must choose one and then return to the top of the cliff. We will regard that item, as well as your standing, and grade you appropriately. Ozpin glanced at the freshman. Any questions? Naruto did chuckle here. If Ozpin was anything like Kakashi, he wouldn't even regard the fact anyone had one. This was proven when John tried speaking up only to get cut off with the headmaster's, "Good. Now get ready." The students began to get set, most set for a leaping position. John took the silence as his opportunity. Sir, I got a question. Next to Naruto, Weiss was launched into the air. So this landing strategy thing. He didn't hear anymore as the ninja was thrown into the air. Just as his feet were about to leave the springboard, he jumped and shot out in a wider arc. He heard John scream and looked back to see his fellow blonde screaming his head off. He would have helped him, but when he tried to grab him, he couldn't feel the arc using his aura. Naruto could use his telekinesis on anyone with aura, but it has to have been activated. That's why he's so skittish to fight. He didn't worry though, as a quick glance at Pyrrha and he figured she would get him. Naruto laughed pretty hard when he caught sight of Ruby slamming into a Nevermore, killing it. Her cry of, "Birdie, no," didn't help. The blonde was finally coming down from the sky and used his aura to enhance his muscles so when he grabbed the top of the tree it wouldn't rip his arm out. Swinging around once, he backflipped in the air, grabbed Shingetsu and slammed the extended scythe into a tree so he could spin down it. Landing on the ground, he looked back at the tree and sweat dropped as it looked like it had been a peeled orange. He could hear the explosions of Yang's Ember Cecilia blasting nearby. Another explosion, though this sounded more like a rocket, rang out and he heard John. "Thank you. Pyrrha's, I'm sorry." Right afterward, Naruto chuckled at them. The growls he heard behind him along with the negative energy made him realize that Beowulfs began to surround him. That's weird, they usually ignore me, no matter. Pushing aura through his body, the ninja's eyes glowed an ethereal blue. He held the scythe horizontal to his body, pulling his right arm back and crouched. He twisted his back foot and was gone. The Grimm stopping their approach as Naruto was now behind them walking while whistling. Slowly the Grimm began to drop and dissipate, their masks slashed in half. Ruby had been running through the forest, hoping to either run into Yang, John, or Naruto. She wouldn't have minded Blake, but she had a feeling that she wouldn't be able to hold a conversation long. She came skidding to a halt when White entered her vision and then looked up, catching Weiss's eyes. Normally Weiss would have simply turned and left, but considering what she knew now. She sighed and looked at the red girl. "Look, your sister was right. We got off on the wrong foot." She held her hand up to stop the girl from speaking. "I'm not saying this makes us friends, but I will try to get along with you." Ruby vigorously nodded with a smile on her face. "Good, now let's go. I don't want to be wasting any time and being slow about it." "Whoa, you don't have to worry about me being slow." Weiss jumped back a bit as Ruby was in front of her. "What? Wait, when did you?" "Weiss, I can't really deal with people that well, but monsters are a complete different story." The redhead slinked next to Weiss. "You're about to see a whole nother side of me today. After everything you're gonna be like, wow, that Ruby girl is really, really cool, and I want to be her friend." With that said, Ruby dashed off with her semblance and left Weiss in the clearing. She shook her head as she heard rustling next to her. "Yet you're still wasting time, Ruby?" The growls and red eyes that lit up around her gave her more than enough information to tell it wasn't the small redhead. "Ruby, Heelu, anyone here?" Yang had been walking for about 5 minutes after her excellent landing. "I'm getting bored here." The sound of some bush moving drew her attention and she walked over to them, a small smile on her face. "Ruby, is that you?" They pulled the bushes apart and looked up slowly, losing her smile. "Nope." Yang tucked and rolled over to the side as the Ursa Grimm plowed straight at her. She stood into a slight kneeing position and activated Ember Celica. She looked over at the Ursa to see it had another jump next to it. The one she had originally dodged jumped at her, arm back ready to claw her face off. Yang simply pulled her right arm back, loaded a round into the chamber, and punched the Grimm in the stomach, firing the round at the same time, causing a small explosion that sent the bear-like beast backward. The other Ursa came running toward her, mirroring the other's move. Yang stepped back and jumped, uppercutting the bear beast and using the exhaust on her gauntlets, threw her elbow out to give the kick to the Ursa more power. It flipped end over end and plopped on its stomach. Yang smirked cheekily. You two wouldn't have happened to have seen a small girl in a red hood, have ya? The Ursa nearest her roared. Well, you could just say no. She stepped back as it swiped down at her and backflipped when it swung horizontally. She laughed as she landed on her feet. Geez, you two couldn't hit the broadside of a. Yang's taunt was left unfinished as she saw a small yellow hair, her hair, fall gently in front of her. Yang closed her eyes and clenched her fists, popping the knuckles. She opened her eyes again and they shone red. The two Ursa glacked at each other, suddenly feeling very confused. You monster. Ember Celica reacted to her rage and fire exploded around her. She dashed at the two bear beasts. When she reached the first, she slammed a haymaker into its chest, then uppercut it with her left, throwing it up into the air. The pissed blonde shot the ground with her explosive ammo to catch up and gave the bear the right-left combo, then gave it another sideways uppercut. While in the air, she fired another round to add more power into the punch. She landed near what would be its nether regions. She landed a final kick on the beast and sent it through quite a few trees, before turning to the Ursa behind her when it roared. What, you want some too? It didn't give a response as a slash from behind made it fall flat. Behind it stood Blake with her gamble shroud buried in its back. She pulled on the ribbon attached to it and yanked it from the body. The cat shot Yang a smirk, getting one in return. I coulda taken him. Blake shrugged, just remind me never to touch your hair. Weiss had been fighting against the Beowulfs ever since Ruby had left and she was beginning to run out of steam. There were only a few surrounding her now, but that could still make her trip up and die. Come on, Weiss, remember training with Naruto. Feet spaced evenly, right shoulder slightly ahead of the left, and most importantly, be ready to dodge. While she meant to say it internally, she screamed it out when the Beowulf in front of her charged at her with an overhead swipe. Which worked in her favor because had she went with her original plan of attacking, it very well could have meant skewering the small redhead that popped up in front of her. Ruby, you need to be careful. The girl childishly stuck her tongue out and the heiress had to hold back a scream. The two looked around and realized they were in a bigger predicament than they thought. They few Beowulfs had multiplied into around 15. The two touched backs and Weiss whispered to the other girl. Come on, we've got to get out of here. Ruby didn't get the chance to say anything as the girl in white drug her away before the beasts would do anything. Finally away from the beasts, Ruby turned to her. What was that? Why did we run? We could have handled them. Weiss shook her head lightly. That may be, but if I hadn't have dodged when it struck at me and chose to attack, I would have loaded Myrtenaster up with fire dust and blazed the Beowulf to the ground. But you got in front of me. Now imagine if I had been attacking and couldn't have stopped. I would have moved. How would you know to move if you couldn't see me? I would have been fine. Sure you would have. Whatever, let's keep moving. Weiss turned on her heel and kept walking. Ruby screamed in frustration and decided to let some of her anger out before she did something she regretted. She swung Crescent Rose around and sliced a tree in half, making it crash behind her before continuing on with Weiss. Neither noticed the black feather falling to the ground behind them. John and Pyrrha had been walking for a few minutes. She had found him soon after she got to the ground. Gunshot went off in the background and John turned to her. Ya hear that? His companion nodded. Gunfire. It seems our comrades have encountered resistance. She kept walking and pushed a branch out of her way. It swung back and smacked John in the face, making him fall on his butt. John, I'm sorry. He rubbed his face. It's nothing. Just a scratch. Pyrrha looked at him strangely. Why didn't you activate your aura? Was the intelligent response. Your aura. Gesundheit. Pyrrha shook her head. John, do you know what aura is? The blonde, P.S. shed, of course I know what it is. Do you know what it is? The invincible girl stared at him blankly. Aura is the manifestation of our soul. It bears our burdens and shields our hearts. Have you ever felt like you were being watched without knowing that someone was there? At the same time she was talking with John, across the forest, Ren had come to a stop in a clearing. Slowly, behind him, a giant black snake rose. It encircled the stoic boy and struck at him. Back with Pyrrha and John, the redhead continued. With practice, our aura can be our shield. She started walking around him. Everyone has it, even animals. What about monsters? John asked. No, the beasts we fight have no soul, and therefore, no aura. They are creatures of Grimm, the manifestation of anonymity. Back with Ren, the boy had just blocked the strike the King Taiju had attempted and backflipped away from the beast. It encircled him again, possibly trying to squeeze him with its oversized body. Ren simply flicked his wrists and his weapons popped out. The boy jumped up next to the beast's head and out the opening it left, shooting the beast as he fell and kicking it in the face as he passed by it. Pyrrha and John still talking. We are the light and they are the dark. Right, that's why we fight them. Ren jumped over the snake, slashing at its neck as it tried rising up. It's not about why we fight them. It's about knowing. The snake slithered around quickly, coming back to strike at him. He jumped over the attempt to bite him, making the snake slam its head into the ground, stunning it. Ren twisted in the air and stabbed down on the base of where the snake's neck would be, just below its mask. Understanding both light and dark, doing so help us manifest our aura. Everyone has some of both. Behind Ren, another large snake, this one white, began to rise. He turned just in time to see the head come at him, but he had enough time to flip off to the side. He looked up to see the one he thought he had killed begin to rise with its twin. By bearing your soul outward as a force, you can deflect harm. Ren narrowed his eyes and jumped above one of the strikes at him so he could run up the length of the snake's body. Using his running momentum, he slid along the bodies and shot at them in random intervals. All of our tools and equipment are conduits for aura. One of the snakes got a lucky hit on him when he went airborne and he lost his weapons. It turned its head and went to bite the boy. You project yourself and your soul while fighting. John opened his eyes with a joyous smile. It's like a force field. Her back was turned, but by the tone of Pyrrha's voice you can tell she rolled her eyes. Yes, if you want to look at it that way. Ren was holding the King Taiju back with his palm, a purple light beginning to shine from his palms. He gripped the fangs of the beast and ripped them out, causing it to fall in pain. Ren then stabbed one of the fangs into its eye and struck the back of it with his enhanced fist. Energy rippled in the snake's head from one side to the other, and then it exploded. He turned and ran toward the other snake. Pyrrha walked up to John, placing her palm against his cheek. Now, close your eyes and concentrate. He was hesitant but went along with it. Pyrrha closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them back up, her pupils dilated. Her reddish aura lightly covered her, John's own silver gray reacting to the other's presence. For it is in passing we achieve immortality. Through this we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all. She placed her other hand on his chest, over his heart. Infinite in distance and unbound by death, I release your soul and by my shoulder, protect thee. She let him go and stepped back slightly out of breath. Pyrrha? She shook her head. I'm all right. I used my aura to unlock yours, but the energy that protects you now is your own. She held a light smirk on her face as she noticed the scratch he had quickly disappear. You have a lot of it. John looked over himself, the gray light fading. Ren stood over top the bodies of the two snakes, brushing his clothes off. Brrrrha. He shook his head with a smile. He turned around and Nora was hanging upside down smirking at him. I still don't think that is what a sloth sounds like. She simply stuck her tongue out and booped him on the nose. Ozpin stood watch over the forest, contemplating on the groups that have been formed. Speaking of, our last group has been formed, sir, one Nora Valkyrie and Lai Ren. Poor boy, I can't imagine those two getting along. Ozpin smirked behind his mug. Oh, he had an idea that they'd have no problem. Still, he's probably better off than Ms. Nikos. The headmaster simply med and looked back at the forest. I don't care what his transcripts say, that John boy is not ready for this kind of combat. Glinda stopped the feed of the last pair. Though I guess we'll find out. What of Mr. Uzumaki? I have no doubt he can handle himself, but still, it'd be nice to know. Glinda swiped over the scroll a few times, stopping on the video of his landing. She held the device in front of the gray-haired man and saw him raise his brow. Oh, I knew he was fast, but still. That is a level only someone like Oobleck can reach with his coffee. Glinda would have laughed if it wasn't so horrifyingly true. Where is he now? She swiped through the cameras coming to the one just at the temple. It appears he's simply waiting now. Though by the look on his face he is either annoyed or can feel his friends in fights. Ozpin sipped his coffee again. Glinda, pray that he never thinks that we are on the wrong side. Because if he does, it's this way, no, it's this way, definitely this way. Weiss had been walking back and forth in the same spot for the past 5 minutes. Finally she gave up. Okay, it's official, we passed it. Ruby rolled her eyes and stood up. Why can't you admit you don't know where you're going? Because I know exactly where we're going. Weiss took a few steps forward. We're going to the forest temple. Ugh, oh stop it. You don't know where we are either. Ruby turned and looked at her. At least I'm not pretending to know everything. In her head she sighed. It started out somewhat well when Weiss had originally agreed to be there, but now. The heiress stopped and looked at her, a fierce look in her eye. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're acting like a big jerk. Let's just keep moving. Ruby behind her mimicking her. Just keep moving, hurry up, watch where you're going. Gosh, you're so bossy. I don't understand how Naruto could be around you for 3 months. Weiss turned on her heel back at Ruby. I'm not bossy. Don't say such things. Then stop treating me like a child. Stop acting like one. Then stop acting like you're perfect. I'm not perfect. Normally the heiress would have come back with a witty comment about still being better than her. However, when she did the same thing with Naruto back before she really got to know him, the spar she had with him afterward had proven that you never judge someone just because of how they look or what they're learning. So to stop herself, she turned and walked away, Ruby following lightly after her, her head down. Yang and Blake came to a stop on a small cliff overlooking a stone-like encirclement. Yang was about to ask if the cat had thought this was the right spot when both of them caught sight of her pseudo-sibling. They walked down with smiles on their faces. Hey, Naru, honestly you didn't even have to come here yet, you did anyway. Waiting for a couple of certain girls? She put her arms together and bent slightly, pronouncing her chest. Blake blushed lightly at the implications of what she had said and also her thoughts that he was waiting on her. The blonde ninja chuckled, oh I might have been. But really it's to see who got here. A couple other groups came before you. A scowl passed his face as he remembered that card and kid. Pick what you like and hope you don't regret. The two girls gave him a deadpan. Thanks, that makes us feel better about this. John and Pyrrha stood outside a cave with drawing on the side of it. He glanced over at her. Think this is it? They lit a torch and continued inside. After a moment Pyrrha spoke up. I don't think this is it. John sighed however. Pyrrha, we made the torch, we could at least see where it leads. He tripped however and lost hold of the light, dropping it into water and plunging them into the dark. John stood up, and even in the dark he could feel Pyrrha's smirking face. Pyrrha looked to him for a moment. Do you feel that? His immediate response, soul-crushing regret? No, it feels warm. Naruto looked at the two girls in front of him. Hey, I'm just saying it could be the best or worst decision ever. The deadpan again. He chuckled and plopped down. While Blake had been looking at the Black Queen, Yang walked over to the white pieces and grabbed the knight. How about a horsey? She threw it up in the air at the cat. Blake caught the piece with a smirk and eye roll. Sure, why not? They came together standing a foot apart. Well, that wasn't too hard. Blake looked at her. Well, it's not like this place was hard to find. The ninja laughed at her. You'd be surprised. There's been a few groups that already passed by here. Yang looked at him. You didn't call out to them? Let him know it was here? The ninja shook his head. Nah, it's not my place right now. Besides, you know what this test is, right? He stopped talking. The ninja stood up, his eyebrow raised. I've got a bad feeling now. Blake grabbed her weapon. Whenever he had a bad feeling it was almost always right. Pyrrha and John had walked a little further in. When they passed a corner there shone a golden teardrop, floating in the air. The blonde kid grew excited at the sight of it. That's the relic. He bounced on his feet lightly. He went to grab it when it moved away from him slightly. Behind him Pyrrha's eyes narrowed. Hey, bad relic. He kept grabbing at it until finally, gotcha. It began to lift him up. Pyrrha took a step back, her eyes starting to widen. John, said boy looked down as red eyes lit up in front of him. Back at the relic altar the small group heard the sound of a high-pitched girlish scream. Yang turned toward the sound. Some girl is in trouble. She turned and looked at the other two. You heard that right? Pyrrha was seen booking it, covering 20 feet in less than 2 seconds. Behind her the sounds of the screaming girl grew. Finally the Deathstalker bust through the cave wall with John still hanging onto its stinger. He was half hysterical. Ha ha ha, why? Oh, Pyrrha ha ha ha, said girl, turned and held her spear out. John looked at her and with his expression as calm as can be he screamed out to her. This is not the relic. The Deathstalker moved slightly, causing John to let out more whines. "John, whatever you do, don't let," before she could say go. The scorpion flung its tail back and made the blonde boy go flying. The invincible girl watched him fly by. "Go." She turned back to the Deathstalker. It hissed at her. In a style Naruto would be proud of, she rubbed the back of her head, lifted a leg and her arms and got the hell out of there. All that was left were leaves falling to the ground. Blake was looking up at the sky. Naruto followed her gaze but then shook his head. Yang was oblivious to this. "You two heard that right? What should we do?" The sight that met Yang's eyes was her little sister falling from the sky. Naruto would have done something again, but in an event only thought of in stories, John came flying out of the sky from another direction and collided with Ruby, sending them both into a tree. Blake looked at the blondes on the ground. Did your sister just fall from the sky?" Yang was speechless. "Www." An Ursa Major came crashing through the woods in front of them. It fell to the earth and showed Nora along with Ren riding on its back. The Oranget looked down on its body. "Ah, it's broken." Ren got off the creature's back shakily. "Nora?" She looked at him. "Never do that again, please." His request fell on deaf ears as she was already next to the relics. She stared at a white rook piece before snatching it and singing, "I'm queen of the castle, I'm queen of the castle, Nora." Ren called out to her at the end. She simply turned and smiled. "Coming, Ren." Naruto blinked at her and Blake as well as Yang just stared. The cat spoke in disbelief. Did that girl just ride in on an Ursa? The ninja just shook his head while Yang tried speaking again. "I," was all she could get out before a deep hiss came out from the forest. The sight of Pyrrha running from a Deathstalker grabbed everyone's attention. It took a swipe at her from behind but she jumped through the claw and rolled to keep her momentum from running. John saw her from his position in the tree. "Pyrrha." Ruby stood up next to him. "Ruby?" She ignored him and jumped down, landing next to her sister. "Ruby?" The little redhead looked at her sister and grew a smile. "Yang?" She went in for a hug but Nora came in between them and shouted her own name. Naruto calmly coughed and spoke. "Don't tell me that you all forgot that Pyrrha most likely ran all the way here with a Deathstalker on her ass." Nora was just doing this weird little dance that looked like she had to pee. Blake was stoic, and Ruby was pretty calm, her older sister however. Could everyone just chill out for two seconds before something else crazy happens? Slowly a shadow overtook the group and Naruto sighed with his palm in his hand. "Yang, I'm usually the one that causes crazy shit to happen. Yet look, you've taken my title." Ren joined them and sighed. Ruby rubbed the back of her head. Yang? How could you leave me?" Everyone looked up and saw that Weiss was hanging on to the Nevermore by one of its talons. The ninja looked at the small redhead next to him. "Really? You really jumped and left her?" She rubbed her head. "I told her to jump too." Naruto yelled to the heiress. "Weiss, if you jump I'll catch you." Ren mumbled, "And she's falling." John saw this as a chance to look cool and jumped to catch her but ended up not falling when he jumped off the branch. Weiss had stopped falling as fast as well. One look at Naruto showed him with his arm outstretched, his blue aura around him, a small blue hue around the Arc Boy and Weiss. They touched the ground and the girl in white shot him a "thanks." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to get rid of those things." The sight of the Nevermore turning around to come at them, as well as the Deathstalker trailing after Pyrrha, met their eyes. Yang shook her head. "Great, now we can all die together." Ruby took off. "Not if I can help it." "Ruby, be careful." Naruto's call fell on deaf ears as she got slapped with the Deathstalker's claw. She slowly stood up. "Don't worry. I'm fine." She turned and saw the beast within feet of her, so she shot her rifle to push herself away. She turned and ran back to the group but the Nevermore that had been forgotten reared its head and shot its feathers at her. One got lucky and stabbed her cloak into the ground. Yang began to yell out her name in worry. "Get out of there." She turned and looked at the small group. "Do something." Naruto took a step forward but Weiss put her hand on his shoulder. She zoomed past them all and right as the Deathstalker was about to strike Ruby, a wall of thick ice formed around her. Naruto smiled and turned to the group. "While she's getting Rube's time, you need to hurry and grab a piece. I have a feeling we're gonna leave afterward." They nodded and those who hadn't grabbed one now had a relic. He heard the small speech the heiress gave to the redhead and smiled. Yang held her sister in a bear hug. The ninja looked to the group. Alright, everyone got a piece? Nods. Good, now go, I'll give you some cover on the way out. The sisters along with Weiss and Blake nodded and started the trek back, but the rest grew worried. John spoke for them. Wait, you're gonna fight that thing alone? Look, dude, I don't really know what you can do, but I wouldn't feel right with myself if we just left you here. Everyone was in agreement with his statement. Weiss turned around and answered for him as Naruto had already begun walking toward the Deathstalker. Trust me when I say don't worry. I spent almost 3 months training with him in a weapon he barely knew how to work. In less than a week he not only learned my style but created his own. His semblance is nothing to laugh at either. She shivered lightly at the memory. Said ninja called back to them, just go. I'll be right behind you, I promise. He turned his head halfway and smirked. And Naruto Uzumaki never goes back on a promise. He turned back to face the scorpion after the group left. Well now, it seems it's just you and me, big guy. The Deathstalker hissed at him, trying to pry its claw from the ice Weiss had left. Is it girl then? Well, it won't matter in a second. He held his hand up for his semblance. Normally I do a whole little flashy moveset, but I realize you beasts don't care too much for them. So, sorry I suppose. Behind him 3 skulls, 3 to 4 times larger than normal, appeared gathering energy. But I guess this will just have to do. With the group heading back, they all turned when the sound of a large explosion sounded out behind them. Ruby had stars in her eyes while Weiss, Yang, and Blake shivered. The rest of the group was worried, but Weiss ushered them along, ensuring them Naruto was fine and it was just a side effect of his semblance. Hearing that fact, Nora smirked and mumbled something about grenades and trying to match. The screech above them let them know that they were still followed by the Nevermore. The group came to a set of ruins beneath the cliff they had to reach. They split apart to hide easier from the crow-like Grim. Yang looked at the 3 with her. Got any ideas besides pelting it from here? The sound of a stampede reached their ears and a Deathstalker ripped from the trees. John screamed out. I thought Naruto dealt with that thing. Weiss yelled back, with what Naruto did there wouldn't be anything left, it has to be another one. The blonde boy groaned, "Aw man, run." Pyrrha stood and bolted with him, the others following her lead. When Ren and Nora took off, he looked at her, Nora, distract him, and ran diagonally toward the Nevermore. Nora went sideways and pulled her weapon off her back, firing 3 grenades with one nailing it in the face. She kept firing to drive it away when she turned and saw the Deathstalker behind her. Ren and Blake appeared slashing at its face, with Weiss dropping next to Nora to grab her and use her semblance to jump away from them. Pyrrha saw the scorpion still on them, so she turned and knelt. Keep going. She switched her spear to rifle form and fired to keep its attention on her as the group ran, Ren landing next to her to fire as well. Blake jumped, just missing a strike from its claw, and kept going, being followed by the other 2. The group ran along the bridge, hoping to get as far away as possible, but the Nevermore came back and smashed through a few support beams, splitting them up, leaving Blake, Pyrrha, and Ren to deal with the Deathstalker. Man, we have to get over there. They need our help. John stared at them from the other half of the bridge, Nora walking up next to him. Let's do this. He looked at her, yay, but how? I can't make that jump. The girl smirked, quite evilly, and knocked him back with her gun. She transformed it to show a large hammer and reared back and slammed it into the broken end of the bridge. John had gone flying from his downed position over to the group fighting the stalker, screaming the whole way. Nora smirked and placed her hammer under her foot, standing in the classical, explorer, pose. She pulled the trigger on the weapon and shot off after him. Using the momentum she gained from the jump, she pulled the hammer back and rammed it onto the scorpion's face. Its stinger reared back and was about to strike her, but she pulled the trigger again and shot off its face. What she didn't think would happen would be slamming into Blake and knocking her off the bridge. The cat faunus cried out in shock and went to quickly switch weapon forms, but didn't have to as she stopped moving, a light blue hue around her. She looked up and saw her blonde ex-partner. He brought her up and gently set her down with the sisters and heiress. He jumped up next to them with a toothpick he pulled from somewhere. The feathers on the Nevermore are gonna be thick. Yang smirked, well then. She Ember Celica. Let's light it up. Even by my standards that was bad, Yang. Shut up. THSTA all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.